So Mary Lynn, we just called ourselves to order here. Sorry, I forgot to unmute us. Do we need to, I don't see it on here. Do you want to do a roll call?
Yes.
Okay.
When I call the jurisdiction, if you could just say your full name. Campbell. Cupertino.
Stephen Scharf.
Los Altos.
John Mardeau.
Los Altos Hills.
Gary Walder.
Milpitas. Monte Sereno.
Rowena Turner.
Morgan Hill. Mountain View.
Lisa Madchak.
Palo Alto. Saratoga.
Mary Lynn Bernal. Yes.
San Jose.
Chabby Jones.
San Jose.
Johnny Camis.
Santa Clara. And Sunnyvale.
Glenn Henders.
You have quorum.
Awesome. So let's move to the consent calendar. The consent calendar, which is just our minutes. Anybody have any comments, corrections to it? Is there a will of my colleagues?
Move to accept the minutes.
Second.
If there's no other discussions, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Any opposed? None? Let me just sign this real quick for her so it gets done. I don't have any remarks. Do you have any, Chapman?
Only to say that the chair said that he's not going to leave any other meetings early because he doesn't want to leave me in charge because he doesn't know what I'm going to do.
Just for the record, I did not say that. So here in, we're going to go.
Actually, Chappie, he was grabbing about to hold in before he got his shit off.
Okay, so before we go into the informational briefing about South Florida, what we're going to get to is, my understanding is the FAA has brought some brilliant, experienced, heavy-duty technical knowledge to us and have some stuff that they want to go ahead and share with us. So just to kind of give how I'm going to see the meeting go today, is we're going to go ahead and start with the FAA. I know that you've got some timing considerations, so we want to get you in early. We're going to let you guys present what you want, and then if we will go to some questions from us, if we've got any, for what goes on, wrap that up. Then we're going to go ahead and we're going to let Lisa and Gary give a quick update on how they created their list. And then what I want to do is we want to dive into the list and go through kind of an explanation of what's there, make sure everybody can start to understand what it is. We're going to have the ability to put it up on the screen, so if we need to, if there's clarifications or edits in line, we can go ahead and make. With the ultimate goal is we're going to want to be able to go ahead and rank the list, kind of group things that are similar together, rank the list. I don't know that we're going to be able to get to that today, but my intent would be by the end of the next meeting, we can get that all done so that we'll take that into the following meeting. We'll try and have that as an attachment, and we'll try and write up the draft of what our report's going to be, so we can bring those two things into the following meeting of what goes on. So that's just broadly kind of terms of how we want to go ahead and go. In between the FAA speaking and before we get to some of our stuff, we'll have some public comments along the way. So if everybody's cool with that as a strategy and a direction of what we're going to go ahead and do, we're going to go ahead. Yeah, sir.
I was wondering, based on the last meeting, if you can lengthen public comment from 2 minutes to maybe 3 minutes?
No, we're not going to do that. Lisa.
So I'm wondering if we, instead of prioritizing them today, want to have input from the FAA on these first. As I was kind of going through them, I thought, well, this might be high priority for me. If it's going to take 5 years to do, something that might be lower priority, that might be easier to do, might be higher priority in the end. So I feel like...
And that's certainly something we can do, is because that's where I think we have to go through the first list and get the committee comfortable with what the list is.
Perfect.
And what that means, and if the FAA's got suggestions or questions we want to ask, we can certainly do it. And that's why I've asked Matthew, he's going to be able to bring it up, so that if we have more questions on an item or additional information to add on an item, we can try and real-time add that stuff in.
Okay.
And the people from the FAA, I think you guys have a 3:30-ish kind of a timeline you're on, that when we get to asking questions of them, we might before we even get to the list, if you've got things that are relevant to the list, that they might not be here when we get to that part, we can ask those questions along the way.
Okay.
Does that all make sense?
Yeah, because I think it's good to get their input.
Yeah, no,
now.
no, yeah. Okay, so we're all set with that? Everybody's comfortable with what we're gonna do today?
Blank.
Yeah.
Given 2 meetings ago when I didn't know who I was asking to speak, and I don't want to repeat that again, could I please request that as the FAA individual speaks, that they identify themselves at least one time so that I can catch whose voice is speaking? Thank you.
I think that's a completely reasonable request. So we're all set how we want to go ahead and charge forward. So with that, we're going to go to the FAA.
And if she can't hear us, we're doing this, let us know, we can move to the front of the room.
Yeah, I mean, while you guys are talking, you want to come up and sit over here at the adult turkey dinner table?
I like it better than having our backs to everybody. Do you guys mind, move over this way? Sure.
Yeah, please.
It probably would be better if you were closer. Thank you very much.
Yeah, they're coming close because where the microphone and stuff is.
Yeah, thank you. Have you intentionally gone mute?
Yes, we did while people were moving around. It was really noisy as people shuffled papers. Okay, so we're back to the FAA.
Sure. Can you hear me okay on the phone?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
So my name's Joe Brook. I'm an analyst up in Seattle at the Western Service Center. As I think they referenced in the previous meeting, we were in the middle of a move when you guys put out your February 28th document to us. We had some issues with getting our lab computers back up. They're back up this week, so that's why we have this data, but it wasn't here earlier. So this is data regarding that February 28th document. It is from Northern California TRACON radar data. And the numbers that I looked at with, or the months that I looked at with this, I looked at 2011, 2016, and 2018 based upon that document. All the tracks are color-coded, so any teal tracks are referenced to the February 2011 month. Orange is March 2016, and pink is January 2018. I chose those 3 months because of the number of tracks that I got when I looked at them. Some months were in the low hundreds, some, I think one had up over 2,000. So these 3 months for those respective years were the closest in having the same number. So this first slide, this is on slide 3, does the person on the phone, do you have this PDF Yes. as well? Okay, so I'll try to announce the slide numbers. If I forget, just remind me. Also, my background is ATC, so this stuff, I guess, is easy to me. If I'm not speaking in where you guys are understanding it, please ask my question. Okay, so this is 2011 data. For that month, there were 1,111 arrivals. The Zorsa dot there is the waypoint. There's PUC, which is approximate. PUC is no longer a waypoint in the NAS, in the National Airspace System. I believe it's Jason. Is it Jason or
Jason.
Jessen?
Jessen. Thank
Jessen,
you. It is Jessen
okay.
County, right, sorry.
Jessen is what I would call upstream from that. So that is traffic data from 2011. And San Jose is marked on the right. Faintly in the background behind it, you can see, excuse me, you can see circles around each of those waypoints. Each of those circles has a radius of 1 nautical mile. This is the 2016 data, same waypoints, but they shift. And the 2018. So this is all 3 of them on top of each other. It's a little difficult to see. So this is the same one that I showed earlier. This is slide 7 now on the phone. This is the one I showed earlier with the 2011 data, and I'm going to break it down a little bit in the next slide. Excuse me. All right, so this this represents the aircraft that passed within that 1 mile ring, that 1 nautical mile radius ring around the park. There were, at the bottom, you can see some numbers there. There were 506 of those 1,111 aircraft, or about 45%. And there were some questions in the report about how many passed near Zorsa. This answers that question. Within the 1 mile radius circle around Zorsa, there were 502 of that 2011 data. And the mean altitude, the average altitude of those aircraft was 2,730 feet.
Next question.
Yes,
The arrival, this is only South Florida arrival you're
This is-
talking about?
this is only San Jose, South Florida.
And
arrival aircraft.
all of those tracks are those 11?
No. So let me back it up. Back on slide 7, that is the 1,111 tracks.
Okay. Got it.
Slide 8 shows the 506 that go through the circle around Puck. Excuse me. Slide 9 shows the 502 aircraft that only go through the circle of Zorsa,
Thank you.
around Zorsa.
And can I just ask, let's try and let the FAA go through their presentation, have questions at the end, unless there's something really that just should be appropriate to ask right there.
I'm happy to stop and take questions.
Okay, then
Whichever's
what do you
fine.
say?
Like I said, in my mind, it makes sense. So if it isn't in yours, please stop it. Okay, this is the same format as the other one. This is the original 1,589 aircraft of the 2016 tracks. Again, for all South Flow for San Jose. Same thing for Puck, within that 1 mile radius circle, 205. And then within the 1 mile circle of Zorsa, 1,196. And the average altitude there is 3,040 feet. So you'll notice also that the percentages don't add up to 100%. That is because, let me back up there. You can see on the right-hand side of San Jose, there's some tracks there. Orange is the hardest to see to me, but there are some tracks on the right-hand side, the east side of San Jose. Those are added into the 1,589 tracks. They obviously don't go through Puck or through Zorsa. So those are not counted in the aircraft in number 11, slide 11 and slide 12.
One more question.
Sure.
here. You've got both Puck and Zorsa up there, and I think Zorsa is the current approach path, is that right?
Correct.
So my question is, why were they going close to Puck
Why
on
are
this date?
aircraft going close to Puck there?
Yeah.
Well, I bet is because those are aircraft that are being radar vectored.
Okay, thank you.
I don't control over at NCT, so I can't say that with 100% certainty, but that would be my guess.
So, and since you're taking questions
You
along,
bet.
here with this example, so here you've got, this is what's going near Zorsa.
Correct.
Do you have any thought on why some flights are going farther north into the bay versus, are you going to touch on that?
Let's do that on the next one.
That's
because
fine.
They're hard to see with that orange.
That's fine.
The Google image behind it makes them hard to see. So the pink is easier to see.
Okay.
So the 2018, 1262, same format again, right? And you can really see the RNAV approach. Let me see if I can get the laser pointer to work here. You can see that curve. It's steady. That curve right there is your RNAV approach, right?
No.
It's very defined. This is the aircraft that are within the Puck circle, 156. And within the Zorsa circle, 1,043, very similar to the 2016 numbers. And the average altitude is also very similar to 3,080 feet. So, to your question, Mayor Hendricks, so the aircraft that are here are the aircraft that will be flying the RNAV approach. The aircraft that are continuing up here and coming around, those are very likely aircraft that are being vectored to the ILS approach. Because aircraft that are flying south flow for San Jose, the weather is typically bad, correct? It's not a sunny day like today.
Sometimes it's wind.
It's
There are really a lot of times
It's
it's wind. It's just-
Wind is-
Yeah.
Okay. I thought there would be a weather episode with it as well. But that would be why those aircraft would be going up here, because there is, with ILS approaches, there is what was the word, final approach fix.
Well, it has to do too with the mixed fleet, because a lot of the air carriers will fly the RMP approach, or the mixed fleet here, which is a large part of the fleet here. They don't all have the RMP equipment. They're evolving towards that.
Right.
But San Jose primarily has always had a mixed fleet where a lot of the corporate traffic will fly the ILS. they won't fly the RMP, they'll fly the ILS first. So that's the main reason. I would venture to guess if you pulled some of the data on all the tracks above the rail, above that turn on the RMP, you'll find that most of those are corporate.
And so I did depict the final approach fix on the
You're
ILS.
talking about this piece?
All the stuff above
Everything up
the.
to here?
No.
I find it hard to believe that all this is corporate traffic.
No, I just think a large percentage of it would be. Well, not all of the airlines fly the RMP approach.
Correct.
Well, that kind of makes me wonder, yeah, what percent just in general of San Jose's flights are corporate versus?
They're getting the equipment now. A lot of them are starting to fly it, but they're just predominantly over time, they've always flown the ILS over the RMP. But it's starting to kind of be a little bit of both now.
I think what I'm misunderstanding what you're saying here is this purple representing 1,262 flights?
That is representing the 1,043 flights at the bottom.
1,043 flights.
Yep, they're going through source.
But saying, I mean, just by the way that is colored, that's a huge percentage that's going above that line. And that, I don't think, there's not that much corporate traffic.
No, you can't, and you can't tell the concentration on the curve though either. The concentration on the curve is still a lot of your air carrier. You just can't tell because it's so concentrated. That curve is you're not going to see all the flights within there because it's so concentrated. So is that when you pulled it? That's what you saw when you pulled
Say
the
again?
data?
Say the question.
On the PDARs, when you pulled to get like the number of flights you have here?
Yep,
That thin line.
yeah, the RNAV,
RMP.
that line there,
Do you know what percent of the flights that those are?
I did not pull that. I could. So, like I said, I had limited time because our computers just came back on this week. I could do that.
If you could get that answer for that'd be
Sure,
awesome.
let me take a minute. Okay, so that doesn't mean that, excuse me, that the aircraft up here at the top that are getting the ILS, that they are not necessarily RNAV capable. It could be that those aircraft were vectored there because of sequencing. Because of aircraft that were on the final, they could not fly the RNAV approach, right? And they had to be vectored around. These aircraft that are in here, that are hard to see, there's not many of them, those would likely represent aircraft that are doing visual approaches. They see the airport as they're going up by on the downwind, and they are cleared for a visual approach, so they would turn the aircraft in on the final at their discretion. Does that make sense? Okay. So this is, I believe there's a request for a horizontal picture. I'm going to back this up 1 second. So this, looking at slide 15, is a top-down view, right? The next slide is turning it on its side. So in your mind, what you want to do is take that trombone, right, and turn it left so it's horizontal in your mind. And then when you look at this, that is looking at that sideways. Does that make sense? Okay. So right here, you've got, on the bottom, you've got Zorsa, Puck, and Jessen. And I put a line in there so you can see where it's going through the traffic. So each of these, it's hard to see on this display, but on the right here is the altitude. They're separated by, I believe, 500 feet. I believe each line is representing 500 feet. And so like Zorsa, that altitude, I believe, the average was 1,700, which would be where it was going through here, the average for all the aircraft. You can see that there are some level offs, right? At those stratums, there's a thicker line. There's thicker lines right there. So what that's representing is those aircraft back in 2011, on those approaches, they were largely being radar vectored, right? I mean, near 100%, if not 100%. The aircraft on visuals would not be. But otherwise, they're being radar vectored. A function of vectoring aircraft is assigning an altitude. They are always assigned an altitude. They don't get to just pick an altitude. If they're on a visual approach, then they would be able to choose their altitude as they discern. But when you vector, you assign an altitude, and it is typically 2,000, 3,000, whatever. That's why you see, excuse me, that's why you see the heavy lines at those altitudes, because those aircraft have been assigned that altitude. Does that make sense?
I think it makes sense, but can I, looking at this, this is saying this is Zorsa,
Yep.
and this is 500 feet.
So
And
that,
all this stuff right here, does that mean there are a lot of flights around
that is
500
the
feet?
final. So let me back it up. So that part you're seeing right there is
Looking
this part.
through. You have to look
Right.
through it.
And this part up here that you're seeing, that is, whoops, that is this part. That is those aircraft coming down, and as they turn
Because
around.
it's showing both sides of
You have to
the,
look
You're
through it.
it's looking at both sides of
It is hard to wrap your brain around.
because I'm really trying to look at just one side. Okay, got it.
Yep, I
Thank
agree.
you.
Yep, so
helps.
that shows them coming on the downwind, turning around, and coming back in on the final. So yeah, the heavy, thick line that's descending towards San Jose, that is your final. Okay? The next one is 2016, that's slide 17. That, similar traffic, but you don't see the heavy banding as much on the altitudes. All these aircraft that are coming out here are the ones that are being radar vectored, right? But you can see the RNAV coming down, and it's a nice constant descent. And then the same thing for 2018.
What percentage of these flights have been vectored versus the procedure?
I will get that number for you when I didn't look at that. And then the last, I think this is the last slide, is, this is all of them. I put it in for consistency since I did it before, but I don't get anything out of this. I don't know what you guys do. It's better when it's individual by year. So,
I get a little bit out of that.
you do? All
I
right.
do,
Well,
yeah.
You're
Like
better
that
than me.
they're all, no, the 18 is much more concentrated. The curve
The RNAV part?
and the, yeah, like,
I
because I
forgot.
live under it.
Right. So I forgot about these three. So the last three slides, you had asked for a horizontal picture of aircraft in normal flow. I took that to mean north flow. So this would be the 2011. And I zoomed it out because these other slides, it was skewed a little to the left so you could see the final, right? So there, you don't have San Francisco traffic that you're diving underneath and that you're leaving that under. It's pretty,
Your people see all of them.
pretty standard descent all the way in. And same with 2016 and 2018. And I would note with these two, I left Jason, Puck, and Zorsa in for consistency, but they have nothing to do with these arrivals. Those are south flow procedure waypoints.
And Puck is no longer there.
And Puck is no longer, yeah, correct. And that, I believe, is the last, yeah, that's the last stuff. Any other questions?
So these last three were pretty
Yes.
similar, right?
Yes, so I can back them up again so you can see them.
Yeah.
So that was, those still would have been, the 2011 tracks would still have been on ILS approaches and visual approaches. I'm not sure that there was an RNAV approach back then, I don't believe so. These would include ILS and RNAV approaches with the 2016 and 2018.
It's Mary Lou, and I have a question on 22.
All right,
Going back to what you said, I'm seeing more vertical, horizontal lines here. Does that mean that on North Flow, looking at slide 22, that is a reflection that there are planes that are being vectored in on the North Flow arrival?
yes.
The down just stronger.
Yep, it would paint a clearer picture if we had the top-down view of what was going on there, because those could be aircraft on the downwind, I'm not sure what they are, just looking at this image, but yes, when an aircraft, or when a track is going horizontally along the line there, that means they are level at that altitude.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Question.
Yes?
You seem to indicate, or at least I got the fact that if we continue the way we are, more and more because of upgrade and equipment will use the RNAV approach.
I would say that is likely to a point. As more aircraft are equipped for it, yes. But there will always be a capacity issue into an airport. And I'm not terribly familiar with San Jose, but I know there's constraints around with like San Francisco's aircraft, Oakland's aircraft. And just any airport by itself, when you have a concentration of aircraft coming in, not every single one of them can get that RNAV approach. There will be some vectoring to sequence those aircraft. And then when you add in the complexity of aircraft from different routes coming in, those aircraft have to be merged into a sequence. So there will very likely always be an element of vectoring.
The ILS also has a lower minimum for weather. So like their weather, for example, is like 200 and a half. They can go to 200-foot ceiling and a half-mile visibility. Well, your RNAV procedure is 400 feet and 3/4 mile. I don't have glasses on, but I think it's 400.
Right, so what that means is if the weather
Higher minimums.
is pretty bad, those aircraft that are RNAV equipped can't fly. They can't land because the weather is too bad. So they would have to be vectored around through the ILS.
So I thought that was an interesting comment about capacity for RNAV, so to speak, that path. Do we know if we're close to capacity, or if we're at 50% capacity, or 80%?
I do not know that.
You know, so every airport has like a number that they set with traffic management about how many planes can you fit in the space from the time that they start into the arrival sequence until they come in, and they put like a rate on it, say that 30 aircraft an hour, for example. I've not ever seen that San Jose has hit the capacity of that number, and that number moves depending on weather and other things within the system. But for the most part, the capacity number at like 30 to a 35 rate, where like San Francisco's got a rate of like 45 to 50, and that depends on if they're on the 2.8s or on the 19s. Because when they're on the 19s coming in, I think the rate drops to a 30. So all those things kind of taken into consideration, if that makes sense. So not so much capacity as it is just the volume depending on the weather, because things slow down, things, you know, get stretched out a little bit, and it just needs a little bit more spacing, a little more compression as they're trying to vector everybody in storms or around storms, for example.
Is it really a capacity number, or is it just
Right.
separation between
Right.
the previous flight in front? Because
Correct.
you might have been the whole, if there's only 2 planes in an hour,
Right.
but you are getting, if the second plane's getting too close to the first, that's where you need to go ahead and create the spacing. So it's not a total capacity question, it's really talking about spacing to the one in front of you.
Correct.
Correct.
Right, and you could have 10 in an hour, but they all came in at the same hour, at the same time. So they all decided to fly from Miami to San Jose, and they all ended up in San Jose at the same time. Those 10 are going to be right on top of each other. Then you might have a large span where no one is in that span, and then it's.
That's what I mean,
So
so it's not a total airport
Correct.
capacity question, it's a sequencing at that
That
moment
exactly.
of what's happening.
Hey, really good.
I'm almost trying to pay attention.
I have one, but.
Wait, I have
Yeah.
a follow-up on this.
I
So
thought you were-
is it fair to say then that when you're using south flow because of wind, that there are some constraints because you do have to have more distance between them because of the wind?
No.
No.
So wind does not affect your aircraft sequence spacing.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
Wind affects which runway you're using,
Mhm.
and it affects how much distance they need out of it. So if you think of it, I don't know, boats to me seem a little easier. So if you're in a boat and you have an engine that can take you 15 knots in still water, right? If you're in a river that is flowing at 5 knots and you're going with the water, you're going 20 knots,
Mhm.
right? But you're indicating 15 knots. It's the same thing in a plane.
Right.
You're indicating, say, 200 knots, but if you've got a 30-knot tailwind, you're actually going 230 knots, right?
Mhm.
But as you're going forward and that wind is coming behind you, the wind that is going over the wing that is creating that lift is working against you. So they need more distance because that wind that's going over the wing is slower. Does that make?
It does. So
Kinda
what I
sense.
was trying to figure out is, I personally don't want more use of the RNAV approach, so I was trying to figure out what are the limits around that?
Right,
Is
so
it-
wind doesn't
it's
play into
more-
that, it's more just the runways. It doesn't play, I'm sorry, I misspoke, it doesn't play into the distance between aircraft.
And what the pilot files as they come in, you know, so they're given these procedures, knowing what the weather may be going in, their, you know, whether it's their weight or whatever they have, depending on like the rollout, for example, their equipment type, all those things are factored. They have, like their flight engineers and dispatchers, you know, manufacture all this based on all the data that correlates with the airplane and the weight and the fuel and everything that they've got going. Then they decide, okay, now based on, you know, okay, they're on the 12s, this is what the winds are gonna look like when we get there. There's some low ceilings, so you know what, we might have to take the ILS today, where yesterday we could have had the RNAV. Because, you know, there's a little lower ceilings, less visibility, but today it's just wind, we're gonna go ahead and file for the RMP.
Okay.
It's just what that airline or that pilot decides to file, given those options.
Okay, okay, sorry.
My question is, what's the definition of RNAV? Is that a GPS code approach or your flight management system? What is it?
Yeah, I don't have the definition.
Yes, it is. On an approach, it is GPS.
Okay, so you've got your GPS mapping system tied into the flight management system and you fly the airplane?
Yes, sir.
Correct.
Thank you. That's what I thought.
It's more precise than a GPS approach, correct? There is a difference between a GPS and a.
Well, a GPS approach is the original version that
That's where you
started
saw the
way
map
back
and you hand flew it.
20 years ago,
Right.
15 years ago.
And
RNAV is tied together.
Right.
That's all San Jose had prior to OAPM was a GPS.
Yeah.
So now it's RNP,
Okay.
which is the
I just wanted to
procedure. So
definitely.
there's RNAV GPS, you're right, and then there's RNAV RNP.
Before we go too much farther, so you can introduce yourself as Joe Brook. There's another guy here who let
Oh,
Barry
sorry.
Lynn know his name as well.
I'm Perry Alec. I work with the flight procedures team it used to be Renton, now Des Moines, Washington. My background, I've only been with the flight procedures team about 2 years, but prior to that, for 15 years, I was in Oklahoma City as a procedure development specialist. So I developed the flight procedures.
I just wanted, Mary Lynn had asked about names, so I wanted to try and get everybody's names out. And so now you guys have such distinctive voices, she'll be able to know who you're talking to.
All right, I hope, thank you.
Okay.
Other questions, sir?
I have one question. It has to do with the development of the procedure. I think your name again?
That's Perry.
I'm Gary. Years ago, when I first started flying, there were 3 things in the AIM, the Airman's Information Manual. It said, first priority is safety, the second priority was consistent effect on the ground, and the third one was the efficiency. It seems to me the second one has disappeared somehow. I can't find it in my current AIM manual, so that part has disappeared. But where I'm taking you here is this. In the development of a flight procedure, I'll give you an example of what I'm thinking. Let's assume we have basically the RNAV system we have right today. Is there a way to put a side step left 100 yards, 200 yards, 300 yards, or right the same, and use the same procedure to do that? Or do you need a procedure for each one?
With the RNAV equipment today, that could be done, but it would be a separate procedure. It would have to be because it would have different waypoints, because each one would have its own, even though it's only 100 yards or 200 yards or 500 yards, it's a different lat long, and it would have to be a different waypoint. So those would
There's
be
no way
individual.
you could put a 100-yard side step to the left in terms of your plane management. You just have it fly the same track, but offset.
No.
It was a good question.
Good try.
Let me follow on to, go ahead.
I have a question about bracing altitudes. If we were to brace altitudes, that would mean changing the specs of the instrument approaches, is that correct? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So how practical would that be would that also mean that we would have to descend faster and steeper? And how safe would that be?
Well, there are limits to an instrument flight procedure, and right now the limit is 3.5 degrees. Optimum is 3 degrees, so there's not a lot of play there. Now, smaller aircraft, the category A or B, can go higher, up to 4 degrees, I believe. But again, you can't have one procedure, and Cat C and D are limited to 3.5 degrees, and then Cat A and B can go up to 4. Again, it would have to be a separate procedure for each. But and most approaches are built to the capacity of the runway. So in San Jose, everything's going to be built to a Category B aircraft because the runway will support a Category E operation. So that's going to limit us to 3.5 degrees on a descent angle today, as the criteria stands today.
Would GBAS affect that? Well, in terms of your descent angle, would GBAS have an interface in there?
GBAS has the capability to change that, but our criteria hasn't caught up to GBAS yet. So that would have to be something that comes along behind it to say, yes, you can develop procedures at a higher descent.
But still ties into the runway.
Right. But
So it's still, what surface are they landing, which would allow that to go that
the equipment has the capability to be a steeper descent, but the criteria doesn't allow for that yet.
So if you did what Gary did, and a new procedure, and you split things up 100, 200 yards either way, would the airlines come back and say, that's less efficient, we don't want that? I mean, is there really that much of a difference in fuel when you go that little amount?
If you ever talk to a gentleman named Gary McMillan in the Southwest, yeah, he in the meetings I've been in, it's like he's paying for the fuel out of his own pocket. So
Right.
he wants the shortest, most fuel efficient way he can get. I don't know what the difference would make.
Right.
But
I mean, because to me, this is the 6th meeting, and it really comes down to that, you know, spreading it out makes it less efficient, but spreads out the noise that the airlines would always object because they're measuring every drop of jet fuel. You know.
I just want to point out, not every resident thinks spreading it around is the best.
Right, of course not. Okay.
Lisa, before we go to you, I just want to check, Mary Lynn, did you have any questions?
Point, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Susan.
Just a comment on that. At the NLC meeting in Washington last week,
Right,
I went to the session on airplane noise.
right.
And people were saying there's now published research coming out saying that Next Gen has not improved fuel efficiency. I just thought I'd throw that out there.
Okay.
So I want to, you're procedure guys. And, Gary talks about, safety, and, impact to ground and that kind of stuff. So when you're creating a procedure, can you kind of walk us through how you're taking ground impact noise into account during a procedure? From a procedure perspective, generically, how does that get factored in?
Whenever a procedure, we want to develop a new procedure or a request to amend a current procedure, we'll get the request usually through the aviation community, whether it be air traffic control, the airport management, or actually the airline itself. They'll give us a request. We'll do a quick preliminary look and check to see if it's feasible. But then, at that point, it gets split up into quite a few different offices to get involved. And one of them is the environmental people. Those are the people that deal with the noise. And they'll compare it against current ground tracks, or if it's a new ground track, what kind of, I can't tell you what kind of noise modeling they do, but I know they do different things if we're going to just put another procedure over a current ground track, or if we're gonna come up with a new ground track over different parts of the ground. So it gets split up into different people. We'll go through and we'll do a tentative procedure design, and we give that to the environmental people. They'll do their assessments, and whether they have community meetings or what, because different parts of the country are more sensitive to what happens, and it will involve the community. But that's the environmental folks. They'll give us an okay, and then we'll do the kind of like a final design. Again, people will get to see that with air traffic. We'll look at it, and the airport management and users will get a chance to see that procedure. It gets flown by flight check to make sure everything's safe, and they'll get published.
So from environmental, essentially you get a yes or a no.
Yeah.
And in the procedure building kind of
Correct.
people. In the interest of trying to look ahead to some of our options of what's going on, and maybe you could go back to one of the diagrams that shows the overhead view and maybe the consolidated of everybody.
Oh, you're doing it. I'm like,
So Mary Lynn, he's on page 6 for us to go ahead and do.
Great, I'll be switching over in just a second,
Okay.
thank you.
So one of the questions that has been asked, or things that drives altitude here, is San Francisco airspace. And they have that for when they're in their not, I don't know what the equivalent of South Flow is called for San Francisco.
It's called West Plan, because they're still always on the West Plan. So there's actually a category, it's West Plan San Jose 1-2 or West Plan San Jose 3-0.
Okay.
It just makes a distinction between what San Jose's doing.
So, but because San Francisco would come flying down where they're making their turn off their stuff, because of that, these planes can't go any higher because it gets into their airspace. Logically speaking, if San Francisco switches into its equivalent south flow, where they don't need to come this far south in the bay, would it be possible to create a procedure that says, when they're in that mode, there could be a procedure that says San Jose could fly in a higher south flow model? Does that logically make sense what I'm saying?
when San Francisco is departing towards San Jose, essentially?
Sure.
Right?
You've gone from the arriving traffic altitude restrictions to the departing traffic altitude restrictions.
But, and are the altitude
They're
restrictions
very
the same
similar
for?
because you're still stacking San Francisco, Oakland, and all the other traffic.
I mean, they're climbing out, because they climb at a higher angle than your 3.5 degree limit departure. So, I'm just trying to get that, and
Right.
this is, I'm trying to ask these guys now, just generically, if they've got to have so much space because they're inbound, theoretically outbound from San Francisco is getting higher faster. If you don't see outbound flights flying over Sunnyvale the same way, or this whole track. So just conceptually, is that something that could be looked at? Not, you don't have to say yes, you could or couldn't do it. But does that conceptually make sense? Assuming there was an actual difference between the altitude needs?
I don't know what the track data shows on that. So I can't really answer.
I do know, so at least for San Francisco, because they have the DOT 308 program. So they're allowed to stay on the West Plan a lot longer, and they have to go with or without Oakland. So not without, they have to go if Oakland goes, for example. But because of their DOT 308 program, their Burma use program, they get to stay on the West Plan that they normally are on their 2-8 configuration like 90% of the time. The 19s, like they were on the other day for the first time in a really long time, is like 90%. So we could get you some of the data on even what that looks like for when they're even flying, when the whole bay is south and the amount of time they're going south. One, what the percentages are, but the other is just what then the altitudes of the departures between it's the San Francisco departures, it's the Oakland departures, and then it's all these smaller airports even underneath that, because you still do have You know, whether it's the small GA airports and others that are still kind of flying, everybody's going to the south. So, we can look at the data,
It
but
would just be interesting to be able to understand, it says here, potentially is there X percentage of the time? Because I wasn't trying to say, because San Jose does it, they have to. But whenever they're in that configuration,
and then what would you want accomplished by having, you're just talking about having them still, now if they go
Would
higher, they
you-
have to
would you
go
allow-
further, now you're transferring
well,
them
now
all
could
the
you
way down to
allow, if you took away some of that San Francisco airspace restriction, which is setting maximum limits for how high we can be flying over this whole path, could you then look at a procedure that says, when you're in that mode, could you fly higher?
fly higher, but then how much further out? Because if they go higher, they gotta go further.
Well, all I know is,
That's exactly.
I've been on an airplane that's in South Flow, in San Jose, and you come around here, and, you know, we talk about you want to have a descending flight, but when you get around out here, and I don't care where you're turning out here, when you get out here, planes are on the gas right here, because of the altitude they come here. So if you were higher, then maybe you could curve around here and you do more descending, not on the gas. Like I said, I've been in the plane here where you're out over this way, and they're really having to put the gas on because they have to maintain their height, their altitude, to get to the airport, because otherwise they'd be short.
And I see what you're saying, and so imagining like, you know, what you're proposing, just for our, you know, for discussion's sake. If they're higher, it means they're probably not gonna turn at those points. They're gonna go further down to someone else's area in order to still, if they're higher, they're gonna go further out still to make the descent coming around. It's not gonna look just like this.
Yeah, and if you had your map go a little bit higher, straight up from there is generally over the bay. I know what the map looks like.
No, I understand on the turn, but not extending down from the point that they would come up around.
Isn't there another consideration here though, when San Francisco has 4 runways, 2 going roughly northeast, southwest, and the other one going roughly southeast, 90 degrees from that. And when they reverse flow, they don't necessarily use the reverse runway.
They use like the 19s and the 10s.
That's right.
Right.
So they're, you know, you're making an assumption that you just walk around it like you would San Jose, but in San Francisco, you get a whole different environment.
You have a lot of different configurations. A lot of different ones.
All I'm saying is there's some percentage of the time where San Francisco moves all of its landing traffic that goes, I'll just say, when I'm driving up 101, it's going north, right? It goes somewhere else. And when it goes to somewhere else, they don't need to be as far south. But it's a question I'm just trying to understand. A different question from a procedure perspective. I think Zorsa right now is not, it has an altitude, but it doesn't have the underline on it. So it's kind of a target point, it's not a minimum. Just generically speaking, is that something that could be looked at from a procedure perspective, that we could set whatever these waypoints are, actually set them with the underbar underneath them so that they become minimums, not just, I'll say, random targets?
Well, there's, right, but you see how the segment from Hitter to Zorsa has a minimum altitude of 3,000 feet. So essentially, the minimum altitude at Zorsa is 3,000 feet, even though it doesn't actually have the line at Zorsa. But the segment that leads into Zorsa, the minimum altitude for that entire segment is 3,000 feet.
And I bet if we looked at that other chart, we'd see planes below 3,000 feet.
I thought they were.
And you can, but it depends on what they're doing. If they started with the radar vectors, then they can go down to the radar vector, or if they're visual, then, you know, they're allowed to do it.
And again, this is what we're trying to look at, you know, there's an underlying assumption, and you can agree or disagree, that all things being equal, if a plane's higher, it's gonna be quieter. But you just are telling me, even though we set these, this segment is supposed to be a minimum, planes can be below it. Is there a way to try and get them to where they're a little bit higher? I'm looking for, are there incremental ways to be able to try and improve what is the ground, the noise on the ground?
altitude.
Oh, okay. Zorsa was 3,000 feet.
3,000 feet.
So Zorsa only applies to aircraft that are on that RNAV approach. So when aircraft are coming on arrival and they're going to Zorsa, then that altitude applies. But the minute that an aircraft is vectored, that no longer applies to them. Whatever altitude the controller assigns applies to them. So it's only aircraft that are on the procedure where that applies to them.
And to what you just said, so air traffic controllers can vector and assign people.
Correct.
Do those controllers have procedures that say, whether or not you say Zorsa or not, over these areas, don't go below certain altitudes?
Absolutely. Oh, there you go. Vector out.
And what's that for this whole track? Do you
I
know?
don't know off the top of my head.
Is that something we can find out from the
They
FAA?
certainly can. Do you know it?
No, I do not.
Well, is it a range or is it?
No, it is a hard altitude.
It'll be a hard minimum altitude.
Yeah, there's
So-
like,
But I assume there's a hard minimum and then there's,
Can I clarify with you real quick? The ask is what is the MVA at Zorsa?
and Jensen and used to be Puck. I mean, I don't want to always keep saying Sunny though, because that's where I'm at, because we actually want to know kind of what the minimum is.
there's an
in this-
NBA map we can actually provide you, and you open up the map, it'll show you the entire area where the NVAs are for the entire area.
Yeah, that would be good to see, because again, I'm not just trying to get mine. But would it be a fair assumption that there's the absolute floor minimum, and nobody's trying to get there, and then there's like space above it? So, for example, hypothetically, the floor might be 2,500 feet, but people generally don't go below 29, or, you know, is it gonna be something like that, or
No,
are
that-
people
that's
actually giving the
usable.
floor?
I don't know for San Jose specific, but an MVA is a usable altitude. It's not something, well, I don't want to get too close to it. It would be usable.
So the MPA is something we could, maybe, that might be something we'd want to put on our list to understand what that is.
Sure, I thought you were going to say alter, I'd like to know.
No,
Yeah, alter it.
well, alter it higher.
That's a good, if you look at what the bases are of either San Francisco and Southville, for example, what the base of that traffic is, and then where the Bravo goes, so we have to look at that one.
I mean, it's just, I'm just kind of looking at it, if planes are flying at 3,000 and that's an acceptable altitude, and hypothetically, the minimum's 2,500, what would be the harm in making it 3,000? So you never got anybody in that lower range.
So I may be speaking out.
These are hypothetical.
Right, because I'm not a person that defines MBAs. That's not my, but MBAs are typically, my understanding is they are determined by the objects around them. So if you've got, mountains or buildings or whatever, that will affect what you're into. That altitude, I don't know how subject that is to, we would like it higher, so we can move it higher. It's typically based upon what is around it, but again,
Yeah,
I'm spitballing, I don't know that for a fact.
Again, this is where I'm just hypothetically speaking, trying to understand.
Yep.
Because probably from here to here, there's no mountain there.
No, I know.
It's, you know, sea level is, 50 to 100 feet or something like that.
And so your MBA would be based upon that. So because it's basically mean sea level for that stretch, right? Your MBA is probably not going to be 2,000 feet. It's probably lower. I don't know what it is at that point. That doesn't mean controllers are controlling aircraft down to 2,000 feet or 1,000 feet or whatever that MBA is. But it is a usable altitude that if they need that altitude for some reason, it's there.
So this is where, and I have to say it again, thank you to the FAA, because this is really good clarification and understanding. As again, another one of the people of this committee that lives underneath these flight patterns. What you're explaining now helps me understand better why there is a great range in the altitude that aircraft fly. Because there are times where we see aircraft flying very low. It's because they're allowed to. I'm not sure why they're wanting to go ahead and do that. Because if you're getting, hypothetically 2,500 feet over Zorsa, you're not saving any gas because you're going to have to be on the gas a lot to get your plane all the way around over to San Jose of what it is. So I don't know. So, but it's this explanation of what you're getting in terms of where there are, quote, rules and parameters and all that stuff. And then there's all the variables of, but somebody do what they want because somebody said something.
Well, it's, like we said, it's a dynamic situation. And it's, aircraft are vectored for safety, right? It's to keep aircraft apart. And so you assign altitudes based upon that.
But like, again, I would have a hard time understanding where, for safety reasons, you would vector an aircraft lower over Cupertino or Sunnyvale or Mountain View for safety reasons when they're not close to the airport yet. You haven't even gotten to the down.
The safety reason would be another aircraft that is at their altitude, that you would need to move them to another altitude for that.
Okay, I've been asking a lot of questions. I'm going to go back to my colleagues for a second. Lisa, did you have something?
No,
Just a comment here. Then I think that, you know, virtually all of us, except for our guests here, are amateurs. That we're trying to, we have an idea in mind, but yet what we haven't heard is all of the constraints that exist out there. And this is where the misunderstanding is. You just nailed it here when you said there might be another plane, another altitude. You've got separation requirements, you've got all kinds of things going on here. And I understand that the objective of this committee, however, is to find a way to take noise and close the vehicle to the ground, and there it is. So altitude is your friend. That's generally true for, by the way, for pilots. Altitude is your friend. I add that parenthetically. So the question, I think the question boils down to something more simple. Is there, right now you have a defined procedure, but the instant ATC tells them to deviate, at that point, that procedure just goes back in the book and they're doing what they're told. Right? So is there a way to influence the ATC who are issuing these commands to, rather than take a dive, take a climb and move it out a little bit and do it again? Can we adjust their process in some way?
So, I'll take a step at it, but what I would say is if you've got aircraft coming at torso, right, and your intent is to vector them up around the top part to join the ILS and come back into San Jose. And there is another aircraft, they're going too fast, they're catching that other aircraft or whatever, and you need to deviate that altitude. To go up means you have to go further out. Because the way a glide slope works, an ILS glide slope, is it, as you know, I think you're a pilot, it ascends, and you have to join it underneath that. Okay, so at that final approach fix, correct, don't want to chase it down. So the final approach fix for the ILS is whatever altitude, say it's 2,000 feet. Those aircraft, as they're being turned around, they will be descended before they turn, so that they will join that glide path below, or join the glide path below the altitude. I'm not saying that right.
From below.
Yes, thank you. If we go up, then you have to take them further out in order to join that glide path below, or you eventually will need to bring it back down and turn around. It's more efficient from an air traffic standpoint, but again, it's dynamic. It would depend upon what is going on. But usually it would be more efficient to take them a little lower so that they're still under that glide path. Does that make sense?
I think I understand what you're saying. And could we request the FAA, or what might be nice to know is, what is that ILS, those waypoints of where they can join? I'm trying to say, so somewhere out here, there's an altitude point that they need to join at.
Yep.
So it might be good for us to be able to understand what this ILS path is of, you know, where we're joining into it, because essentially you're saying here, that's the altitude you don't ever want to go above, if I was understanding you.
Correct. Well, yeah, they would have to be re-vectored. They'd have to be brought around.
I can give you a rough idea. About 5.5 miles from the threshold of runway 12 right, the intercept altitude for the ILS is 1,800 feet.
So that's 1 mile.
That's one, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4.
No. Okay, so your distance is going further somehow. So that's 2 miles. The
That's 2 miles, okay.
Radius is 1 mile.
Okay, that's 2, 4, This is 1,800 feet-ish.
Yeah.
Approximately.
Yes. And
So
that
that's-
will be the height of the.
Well, there's your
box.
problem.
That's why you've got those guys going up further. Those
Then
aircraft
that
are
would
being
move
kept
Tennessee
forward.
south 10 miles. That would-
Move the airport.
Yeah, move the airport.
I mean, we're all kind of laughing here just a bit, but that's very good information in
Yeah.
terms of what is driving
So that's why
all
these
this
aircraft,
altitude stuff here.
right, these aircraft
That's
are
what
being
this
vectored
procedure
past
is.
that point,
that's-
and they're joining that. So if it's at 1,800 feet, my bet is they're joining it at about 2,000 feet out here. Because out here, that altitude is probably 23,
Descending toward.
2,500, something like that.
So-
It's increasing as it
Yeah,
gets
I
further.
mean, I've always been looking here, you know, the point they're trying to aim for is, you know, sea level right here. And you're telling me they're aiming for
They're aiming for this.
1,800.
The controllers
Ish out here.
to intercept them onto the final, yes.
And what is the height or altitude when the RNAV joins the ILS? Is that how you say that question?
When
They
you
don't join
are-
ILS, they're on their own procedure, it's an RNAV procedure, but it joins that same track. I know
It
what
joins
you're-
that
I know what you're
track.
saying. Yeah,
But
fine.
what
But
would,
it's actually a little closer, and therefore it's only at 1,100.
1100
Where that arc connects,
Right about.
Because it's closer in.
They're steadier than I am.
that's at
They're
1,100 feet.
lower
Okay.
because they've got to get lower quicker. Again,
They're in that same profile that I'm
Right.
for.
Okay.
They kind of keep the same 3-degree descent.
They have to follow that line down, so as it gets closer, that
Yep.
altitude is lower.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering.
Well, then, that brings me, can you go back and,
You bet.
why not adjust the RNAV procedure so that they're coming in higher and go further out like you're showing most of the traffic in any case, and join the ILS or follow that track in further out? Why is it sharp turn? And I know the answer to that is, if Southwest Airlines say that's going to gas the gas.
That's what our request for a design was.
From Southwest?
Well, I don't know who made that request, but
It's like also you're flying over, I mean, part of it, you can look at, this is Moffett right here, you know, you're Moffett, there are no homes right there today.
Right.
Today.
No, but they're coming in lower.
Yeah.
That's right.
So
They're
my take on that, air traffic take on that, is that to do that, they would be higher, and then you're running into that San Francisco traffic.
all,
You have to fit that under the San Francisco traffic, if
all
you
those
keep that glide,
buckets that
that's
Oh,
where,
wait a minute. So aren't the planes that are further north higher?
the one on that
The
top part.
ones like up
Okay, so-
above? Yeah, they're
So,
higher than the 1,100, they're higher than the
So
1,800.
Zorsa, remember Zorsa was around 3,000 feet, right?
Yes,
Those aircraft would be also vectored likely around 3,000 feet, and then they'd be descended to probably 2,000 feet over here because the final approach fix is 1,800 feet, right?
right?
So those aircraft are higher out where they're going because that is climate.
Yeah.
And I guess I lost track of
Well,
what your
they're question
higher.
higher, so,
Sorry.
so anything lower, I'm sorry, let's see, anything higher as you get closer to the airport would not be competing with San Francisco.
If they're high over here,
They're
you
lower.
could raise this a little bit here, and you're not hitting the San Francisco problem.
Right.
You may be too high to be able to land, but that's a
But
different
that's
issue.
information.
He's getting good.
So, can I ask this question? I've repeatedly heard that the airspace we have here is some of the most complex airspace in the United States, if not the most complex. The only thing comparable is to where out in New York with LaGuardia and Kennedy and stuff like that. From your guys' perspective, and you know, it's just because you say something right now does not mean that's the answer or whatever. And given what you know about procedures, and this is a complex airspace with San Jose, San Francisco, Oakland, lots of other small airports, other traffic that's just going through. Do you have any suggestions? If what we're trying to do is continue to maintain safety for air travel, but find a way to try and reduce the impact of ground level noise from aircraft. Got any thoughts?
I have never worked traffic for airspace in this complex. I was not a controller here, I was in Michigan. I guess I would say that the Metroplex team evaluated all of the surrounding area and all of the different airports and all the traffic that is flying in the area and took that into account. I don't have that knowledge. I can't shooting off the hip. Give you something like that, I'm sorry.
Perry has an
I don't know if you guys
answer.
can, but.
Perry, I know, got an answer right now.
Again, that's not really part of what goes into the procedure design that we come up with, because that's kind of decided by air traffic between whether it be adjoining approach control or approach control and a center as to what the confines of their airspace are. And they kind of tell us what the confines are, and then we have to build a procedure that fits within those confines. But as far as deciding where the boundaries are, that's not, they wouldn't even listen to my suggestions.
It's fine, John, you had something.
So, I think you went to the crux of the point, quite frankly.
Sorry.
You know, it's fine. We're not the experts. We're sitting here trying to understand, and I'm not going to get my aviation degree anytime soon. So it's still too complicated for me. Maybe perhaps we can have them.
Could you please speak up?
Sure. Maybe we can ask the experts to come back with any ideas. You know, if they have any ideas, or tell us, hey, this is impossible.
Well, I think that's partially what we're going to do. With the list we're going to go ahead and go through, we're going to ask for feedback about that. One of the challenges, and here the FAA can correct me if I state this wrong, generally speaking, what they do is they react and respond to requests that are made. They're not generally out saying, here, on our own initiative, let us decide that there should be a new procedure. Is that almost correct?
Almost correct. I think it's just because we don't want to then come out and say, okay, you're going to move the procedure, up further, and then now are we then moving noise or recommending moving noise to another area? So that's the purpose of your committee, is to try to decide, if that's feasible.
And that's where I think when we get to the list, we're going to be able to say there are types of things or that we think might be, and that's where we're going to need help from the FAA to give better explanation. I mean, because I think what I'd like to see is that given this is such complex airspace and the knowledge, I'll use the term brainiac in my most loving and affectionate way, if we can get the brainiacs to try and help with this complex problem, as opposed to just us, because there's been one recommendation that says, well, here, we could just hire some consultants and let's try this procedure, try that procedure, try this, and send them off and let the FAA analyze them. I think we're trying to find a little bit more collaborative way to get to what some of those possible mitigations might be.
And actually, when Fan was here, remember, she did suggest one thing that we should potentially add to our list, which is great. Charter
visual approach.
Visual approach, thank you.
As well as maybe an Eastern approach.
So can I clarify one thing on the charter visual?
Sure.
So in one of the documents, and I don't recall which it was, there was a reference to an RNAV charter visual. I want to clarify that she was talking just a charter visual, because the FAA is not doing RNAV charter visual.
We'll probably come across that.
I don't remember that in there.
I forget which document it was, but I saw that, I'm like, cool. Hold on. And I don't recall why, I just wanted to clarify that.
That's fine. I mean, if we come across it, that's.
They're two different things.
Great charter visual flight procedures, it's at least question 19.
Okay. I just
That's fine.
want to make sure it's.
Mary Lynn, did you have anything?
No, not at this moment. I'm ready to go on to the.
Yeah, that's why I think we're kind of coming to the end of this discussion. Anything else from my colleagues? So let me ask one final question. This is my catch-all question. So given your guys' expertise, and given how we've been kind of talking about what our problem is there anything else you'd like to share with us that we should know, or anything that you think we should have asked you that we didn't ask you?
I apologize, I'm sorry, I apologize. Can you ask them again, please?
So this is my catch-all question, that with your guys' expertise, and thank you for coming with this stuff, and I think you've gotten a little bit of a sense of the problem and challenge of what we're trying to resolve here, is there anything you'd like to add to us, or is there anything you think we should have asked you that we didn't ask you, given your expertise? Now it's your fault if I didn't ask the question.
Right.
No pressure.
I don't really have any suggestions in that vein. I guess in the vein of the spreadsheet that we got, I would say the recommendations that you make them as specific as possible. Because when it's vague, when we look at it, we're not sure what it's about. So, I don't really have anything to point to with that. I would say when you guys make those recommendations, I would try to make them specific.
So specific meaning where some of the things in there, it talks about, it might be here, we're trying to say, let's move traffic a little bit, and we could use this technique, or that technique, or another technique. Is you want it specific that here, to move the traffic in this kind of range, or would you want us to try and say specifically which particular technique to use?
So for like, as an example, approaches from the east, I'm not sure what Dan's recommendation if that is. But if you had a specific approach from the east, rather than just an approach from the east, a recommendation of what it is you're looking for. Are you meaning,
You've
like
already
you
got,
just said,
you've already got
over
the diamond approach.
Fremont? Are you meaning inside the mountains on a downland that's tight like what this is? I wouldn't know what you meant by an approach from the east. Is that, and I'm not trying to make a statement. I'm just saying, it needed, for me at least, it would need to be more specific.
You need a level of I guess what I'm trying to get to is, how specific would you want it from us? I've actually been a little bit concerned to say the answer of what we were asking for was 7.52. And you guys analyzed that and said that doesn't work, but if what we'd asked for was 7.51, oh, that would have been okay. And so I'm want to make sure we're a little bit cautious that we don't get too specific to where we say something, oh, well, that doesn't work, but if you change the parameter ever so slightly, that'd be a fine thing. So that's the balance. I get where you need requirements, specificity, but hopefully when they're analyzed, someone would be able to look at it and go, well, here, you guys almost got it. If you change it ever so slightly, that would work. That we want to make sure we're not eliminating that possibility.
I guess I'm phrasing it more in ambiguity, to eliminate ambiguity.
Okay.
And like another example might be, again, just an example, if you propose, because you were wanting to find out some information about San Francisco and on the south flow, you'd have to be specific, okay, when San Francisco and the entire bay is flying on the south flow, establish an ILS procedure that goes further out, how much further out, where would you want that to be, and then we would be able to come back and say, well, they can only go this point out because these planes are here. We would come back with that information, providing you where that rest of that traffic is going over the top as to what would be feasible and what wouldn't be feasible. So we're not going to not then just give you the answer like, no, can't happen. We'll give you the reason why.
You already have an approach in San Francisco called Diamond, Y-A-M-N-D or something like that. And that path is used often enough, but not so much that it would create a disconcerting conflict or anything.
You're talking about on this flow?
Yeah, well, if Diamond comes in inside the mountain, actually comes over the mountain, goes on up into San Francisco. But you could have people come up the east side of the valley, or you can along the mountain, join them high enough up, then make your left turn over the bay and take you right into the same place. And it's actually, depending on where the airplanes are coming from, it's not a whole lot different than minutes or so at the moment. And that seems like a reasonable alternative, given what we now know.
And so my response to that would be submit that as a recommendation. And then it will be run through the process. Everything will be looked at.
John,
So as far as the.
loud for the phone, please.
As far as the recommendation from going on the east side, we all understand, I hope everybody understands that whatever recommendations come out of this committee has to go to get the vote of the city council, our city council. And I would have to tell you that it would be a waste of time. There would be absolutely no way that going from the east foothills is going to be accepted by our city council. And I just, the only reason I say that is because I don't want to waste a lot of your time, their time, and get people's hopes up or down or whatever, because I can tell you that our vice mayor, our east side delegation would not find it on, welcomed, especially because they already have an airport in their district, the one near Eastridge, which is the
Reed Hillview.
Yeah, Reed Hillview. So I can tell you, we can all talk about it here.
Well, John, if I might, let me
Yeah.
just describe that for you a little bit.
Sure.
You already have a path like that exists,
Yes.
right there now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm talking the diamond approach.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and it's at a high altitude at that point, 79,000 feet, and forgotten the exact altitude.
Yeah.
But if you had airplanes joining in at that altitude in that path, you just basically it cuts from the lower right to the upper left across the bay, and right about the top of the arc there is when it makes a right turn and goes into San Francisco. Well, about the same point if you turn south and come into San Jose over the bay, it's all
At 9,000 feet?
Yeah, well, whatever that altitude, they're descending all the time, you see. But over the ground, it's still quite high. And I think that might be something to consider.
I think Milpitas might object, maybe not.
Well,
Is that
we
this one?
actually, yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, so if you look at, if you have a copy of the maps on O, this is what we're talking about, and I'm not sure it's the same thing we're talking about. I think there's many different eastern maps, right?
Yeah.
So in the interest of, because I want to move on and stuff, I do think we need to have, the interesting question has been brought up of, what the committee's going to write as a report. We have to go get the San Jose City Council to approve it before we send it anywhere. Because my understanding is what we're going to recommend is things that we would like to ask the FAA to come back with more information about, and the possibility of being able to do things. So that's a separate conversation I think we need to go ahead and as a person who's going to be doing some drafting, I need to understand.
So this may also be something that when we give you the MBA map, may answer some of your questions with
Okay.
feasibility.
Right.
Because even though this might be flown, like at least this path being flown right now high, as you start to move around to where you might be trying to descend for an airport, the MBAs are quite high. So just to keep that in mind, but we'll provide you the MBA map that we promised.
And that's the kind of thing we don't have.
Correct, and that's the kind of thing we'll give you, so you don't
Right.
also waste your time doing a lot of work on something that we can probably tell whether there's some MBA issues here, that there's just no descent below a certain point, then making it not safe for a descent to the runway.
One other note, just to put a cap on it. On this diagram, this is Milpitas across here, okay? It's virtually all commercial. And it's about 1.5 miles long. And that's one of the reasons why this route works. They're high out here, and they're descending all along. What they usually do is come in here and go up to San Francisco. I'm suggesting come around here to St. Peter's, Conway Bay, and make a turn or whatever. That's the kind of approach that we think. A number of people have recommended it, by the way, that might have a very significant effect on the noise level we have in the reverse flow.
And again, this is probably something we'll have to go review a little bit more of, we're trying to get feedback about what we recommend as part of what we're going to go do. And then I think we've asked that whatever we do put in the top of the list for the FAA to give us kind of a quick, pros and cons of what they are before a lot more time is spent on it. So it's not like we're going to come out and then that becomes the answer, because nobody's going to just do what we said to do. So I think we appear to be at the end of this piece right here. And what I wanted to go ahead and do, I was going to go to, we're going to change gears a little bit. We'll go through public comments, and then we'll get into going through the spreadsheet. Does that make sense? Maybe let me just modify that ever so slightly. Maybe if I could ask either Lisa or Gary to give us a quick, Reader's Digest of what you did to create the spreadsheet. And I'm just saying, go ahead and do that before we hear some of the public comments. And before I just, go to what you guys, I want to thank Joe and Perry for coming today. This may be, stuff that you guys just know, but I think this is pretty educational to us. And every time we go through this and have different people from the FAA come speak to us, I think we're getting a better understanding, and it becomes one more reference point of the different parameters that are creating the complexity of the airspace?
So selfishly, I had asked they come because I knew that Tony could not be here today, and so this is the team that we do work with in Seattle for the operational support group. And again, their time is limited. I drug them down here at the last minute. They were able to fly down this morning, and they are, again, leaving in about an hour. But there'll be resources that I'll be going to get some of this technical information, which is why we don't always have that information. So I just wanted you to know that they did take their time to come down and do this last minute, and we'll certainly continue to use them as a resource going forward.
And we appreciate it. And if I could request, if you guys could hang around for the next hour of the discussion of what goes on, or until whenever you need to leave for your plane, whatever that time is. And then if you hear something along the way that you maybe think you want to add something to us, go ahead and do that before you guys bolt out the door.
Would you like to go back so you guys have the table?
Well, they didn't show up, so you go ahead and stay there.
You're doing fine.
But now, let's go ahead and either Lisa or Gary, if you could give us a quick Reader's Digest of what you did, and then we'll go to some public comment.
Okay, the lion's share of this work was done by that lady right there. She went back and looked at every single comment that was made, every single suggestion that was written down that she could remember. And then she created a spreadsheet. I was stunned
Well,
by
actually, I took, Matthew sent me the spreadsheet, or the Word document
Yeah.
that he had been using, and I added to that. And,
Oh, that's right, Glenn, you started.
and Glenn had some,
Yeah, that was.
and I got it from.
So the team,
Yeah, there's been a lot of collaboration here. At the bottom line, after we kind of got them into some ordered sequence, Lisa and I sat down last week and spent 2.5 hours trying to figure out what priority and what feasibility there is. I have to tell you, getting through roughly 50 or 60 of these, it took every bit of time we had, and there wasn't any real thought put behind it, except what we thought was a good benchmark. That's the extent of the thought that's in here. But I think we should do now is review what's here and see if there's anything we can consolidate, if there's anything that we can evaluate either the priority or the feasibility. That's what this committee needs to try to find. Having said that,
So again, before going to the public comments, after the public comments, what I think we're going to do is, let's try and go through the list. We're going to be able to present up on the board and stuff first of all to see if there are thoughts and comments we can edit. But I think before we can get to prioritization or grouping, we kind of have to at least do one pass through and go, here, we all know, agree with what we think that line means. So that would be kind of my thought process when we get to that, is we're going to go through kind of an explanation or an understanding. Oh, that looks like a duplicate, that's this, whatever our discussion might be, and then we can get into a grouping or prioritization.
There shouldn't be any duplicates, but I think this is where it would be very useful to have you folks ask us questions about these, because if it's not clear what we're talking about, I mean, this is based on my very naive understanding. And so to have you all ask questions, do you mean this, do you mean that, so we get a better list eventually. Would be good.
Okay, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go to public comments, and then we'll get into that part of the discussion. So Robert, you wanted to talk to us?
Yes. I have some documents that I'd like you guys to see especially.
You can count us to Matthew, if you would, please. Okay, thanks.
Can I hand them to him?
I think it's really, if you give it to the committee, then we'll go ahead and we'll make sure everybody gets copies.
Well, I'd like to have these distributed so that I can, before I get my comments. So could I defer to the next speaker?
Yes. Tony, wrap.
Dear committee members, I would like to repeat 2 facts I believe are worth mentioning because they will guide solutions that should be explored. First, we are all here because a long-standing flight path that worked for both the FAA and residents has been shifted. People that previously experienced at most occasional traffic are now receiving all of it. It is fundamentally unfair. It breaks trust. Government should provide planning security, not subject residents to arbitrary and capricious changes that affect their well-being. Second, flights have been concentrated to the maximum extent. Before 2012, planes were distributed over a wide area, and there were almost no complaints. Now we have the rail, and its use will only continue to grow with more planes using the route and traffic growth projections. So the solution is clear. The rail needs to be undone. And dispersion over the original flight corridor before 2012 needs to be returned. It worked then, it will work now. We have very similar traffic as in 2012. Now, we have heard 2 weeks ago that the airlines aren't going to like it. But you need to remember, this is an industry that won't consider spending $3,000 per plane to fix noisy design flaws. If we were to wait for the airline industry, we would be waiting a long time. Maybe we have to hire some air traffic controllers. But you know what? We've got the math wrong when we're keeping up entire neighborhoods and cities and lowering property values and quality of life because airlines want to squeeze the last few dollars of efficiency out of a route, and the FAA doesn't want to hire some extra air traffic controllers to do the vectoring. So don't take no for an answer. Dispersion over the original flight corridor from before 2012 is the answer. There's more than one way this can be achieved. Please make sure these solutions are pursued with high priority and are reflected in your report. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
We heard that the FAA would want to move noise, and the fact is that noise has been moved. Significant noise has been moved. It's been concentrated, and as you can see from the slides that I've handed, it's been shifted at Zorsa on average about a mile west, a nautical mile west of where it was. And I'm always struck, or I've been struck in this presentation and the earlier slides that we saw by Mr. DiBernardo, at how different the qualitative experiences between the slides that I've handed out and the slides that we've seen from you. Here we can see the dispersion very even 6 years ago, moving to much narrower dispersion 5 years ago to a very sharp rail 3 years ago. That was moving noise. How much noise? Well, in 10 years, if FAA's projections are right, 400 flights a day over people that had hardly any. It's wrong to move noise, as you said, and we want it moved back. Dispersion is the most important thing that we need to achieve, and the rail and the trombone have to be revisited. We have to come up with an alternative that takes these airplanes off of these highly concentrated forms. The last point I'd like to make is that I was glad to hear that we'll get a reason for why things are not feasible, as well as a determination that they're not feasible. That's not what we heard from Mr. DiBernardo last week. But it stands to reason that if somebody can say it's not feasible, they know why. And this committee only has 3 meetings left. If we don't get the reason with the determination, there's going to be no opportunity for a dialogue that can be constructive on these points. Thank you for your attention.
Joel Pullen.
Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Joel Pullen. I'm a planner with the City of Fremont. And I wanted to come today and thank you for your work. I've learned a lot visiting these meetings. It's a very complex issue and a lot of information to synthesize and an unenviable task that you have before you. We were sent a notice these meetings were happening, but we understood from the City of San Jose's City Council decision in January that the City of San Jose, as the airport owner and operator, did not support proposals to simply move existing flight paths and their associated noise to other communities. We understand the letter O graphic provided is illustrative. The City of Fremont would oppose inclusion of item N in the committee's subgroup's list of suggestions if that relocated flight path would cross Fremont. And we believe it would be inappropriate to add a proposal to move the noise over another community after we've been led to believe by the City of San Jose and the committee's policies that such a relocated flight path to a new area that would affect our city were not on the table. Finally, and just hopefully, there was a good reason the City of Fremont had a sky sailing airport on our what's now Pacific Commons in Fremont for years. The Mission Peak and Monument Peak thermals are quite robust, and those peaks are about 2,600 feet. I don't know if there's a standard for elevation above the ground, but that could be useful in determining whether the flight path in that area would be feasible at all. But overall, we would oppose anything that would across the City of Fremont, given the committee's history and San Jose's. Thank you.
Thank you. Jennifer?
comment on the east approach first of all, because there are planes flying the east approach. I mean, I'm sorry, but we were looking, and there's about, probably 8% are flying the east. Not a published east approach, but there are flights flying east into the airport. And we do not want to see that obliterated and folded into the rail, because that's exactly what's happening. Everything is shifting onto this single rail, and it is a problem. So we're not talking about shifting, we're talking about retaining what is already on the east side. That's the first thing. The other thing is dispersion needs to be an issue. We need dispersion. And as Robert mentioned, those flights were shifted over us. When the FAA is looking at the data, they're always looking at, and through no fault of their own, they're looking at large circles. For example, 1 nautical mile from Zorsa as an example, which I think is like 1.2 miles, as I recall. When you look at big areas like that, you're not going to see percentage changes. And even with that big 1 nautical mile between Puck and Zorsa, we still saw about a 35% increase in the flights at Zorsa. So you can imagine if you lower those nautical miles, what you might actually see. And you're going to start, seeing that rail, and it really needs to be fixed. This is a problem throughout the United States. This isn't isolated to us, but we really need to look into that. And if that means hiring more ATC agents to increase the dispersion until we can figure out technologically what to do, then that's what needs to be done. Because this is terrorizing people underneath these flight paths. Plain and simply, and it was shifted over to us. And the other thing that I'd like to mention is on the dispersion. The smaller planes are dispersed, the bigger planes are on that rail.
Okay, thank you. Zachary Crofton?
Just a procedural question before you start the timer. Is this all the public comment, or is this tied to what we just heard?
There will probably be a public comment when we get towards the end of the meeting after we...
Okay, then I'll leave one part out. Okay, go ahead. So one of the things that was asked about by Gary Walduck was about having offsets of the waypoints. In other words, if you have a waypoint, he used small numbers, 200, 300 feet, etc. And the FAA told us that each one of those would be, even though the instruments apparently can now handle it, each one of those would be considered another procedure. I think a different question should be asked, and that question should be, and I hope the FAA would be willing to answer that, is what would need to take place inside the FAA to change it so it's not? I realize, you have an organizational problem. Essentially, you functioned with effectively waypoints, and the equipment wasn't as good, so you actually had wider paths to start with, so you were able to do it before. Now that the equipment's pinning it down to within 100 feet, it sounds like it's still the same procedure you're going through to come up with it. So what organizationally do you have to change such that if you had some sort of offset, however generated, relative to a waypoint, that it's still considered the same procedure and you don't need 10, 20, or however many you need? And I'd like to know what the FAA has to change to accomplish that. Thank you.
Mary S.
Thank you, and I do want to say thank you to the FAA for coming today. It's been very helpful, and really appreciate your open dialogue. So, just want to reiterate what's been said previously. The issue with the rails is just extremely significant, and that has to be dealt with in this meeting. To try to work with changes, but still having these rails, or try to add a rail in another place, it's just fundamentally wrong because of what it does to the people underneath it. And I know, that there's concepts of there's less people being affected, but the people under those rails, it's so bad that it's not acceptable. And so the rail issue has to be broken up and dealt with. And, I really ask the committee to push back if that's the message we keep getting from the FAA, that that's our only option, because it's not a solution that's going to work. And, I ask people in the FAA to raise this as an issue, because I don't think anyone's gonna go away if that continues. The FAA is not gonna get us off their back. So the FAA and the people that are stuck with having to work with this rail system have to move it up the chain. But this is a fundamental problem that has to be dealt with in the FAA or wherever it's coming from. And the other thing too is, it seems like industry has an incredible amount of say in coming up with these rails. And I pay my taxes, and I need representation as the resident on the ground under those. And it's not fair that the industry gets what they want, and we don't, and we're oppressed. We have no say. And now we have to push a boulder that's 25 tons up a hill.
Chris Moyle.
Hello, I just want to pass on 3 slightly alternative pieces of information we've received based on things I heard today. First, with regard to the concept that not everyone wants the planes spread back out again, in our office, 100% of the many, many people who've contacted us over the last year do want the planes spread back out. So, whoever the people are who don't, they haven't come to us. Secondly, on your spreadsheet, page 5 of 6, the next to last row, the one about let's trigger south flow at a higher wind speed than 5 knots. For those who were not in the meeting here last year, FAA explicitly ruled that out, and not as per on this sheet where it says because the you have problems at Eastern Hills. They asserted at that time that the San Jose runway A was too short, and B, the presence of small planes, general aviation, at San Jose Airport would make it unsafe to do it any higher than 5 knots. Now, maybe something new was happening last year, but that's additional information I thought you should have. And finally, with regard to the idea that any recommendation that this group wants to make can be vetoed by the San Jose City Council, I do not believe that is correct. When this committee was set up, the airport recommended that any recommendation this group wants to make should require a 2/3 vote. And then secondly, the city council said, well, we want 2 members or every other city gets 1. But at no point was it ever said that in addition to that, if some recommendation survives a 2/3 vote and 2 negative votes from San Jose, that still the San Jose Council then gets to veto it. I do not believe that is correct. I believe this group can, if it gets 2/3 vote on something, can make whatever recommendation it wants. And you might want to check up on that to make sure that we're all.
We already have a precedent for that. This committee.
Well, here, hold on. So we stay with public comment, and we'll do that after we're done. So
I just wanted to say that was the
and
concept of a San Jose Council veto of any recommendation never came up in that.
Okay.
So you might want to check.
And last, I have Karen Ford.
So I echo the comments that have been made about the importance of dispersion. I myself live very close to Menlo Waypoint, where of course we're getting inundated with the SFO arrivals. So I feel like I have a double whammy. And on my Stop Jet Noise app, the South Flow flights I do record routinely are under 2,000 feet. And so I question why there's such a low altitude for those. When I'm 13 miles away from the airport, why do they have to be that low? I feel like I'm being dive bombed. And if the FAA's mandate is safety, it seems to me there's more airspace to the east rather than to the west near Menlo Waypoint, where we're getting 60% of SFO arrivals, as well as SFO departures coming up over the bay. That seems to me to create a very congested area to the west. So it seems to me that the SJC flights need to be both more dispersed and, more over to the east where it seems to be more wide open if, again, safety is an important criterion, as well as fairness. We need to, it's not fair that certain communities are being inundated with both the SFO arrival flights as well as the San Jose South Flow. Thank you.
Good. So that was the last speaker card I had on this. Do you want to make a comment about your thing, or just do we want to take that as off?
We'll take it off.
So now, I think what we'll go ahead and do is we can go ahead and get, okay, see, it's behind me. My kids don't believe I can't see behind me. So what I thought we could go ahead and do now is to go through the spreadsheet And I'm just kind of taking a process time check here. There's, you know, if our end wicking hour is 5 o'clock, so we're not going to go past then, doesn't mean we have to go to 5 o'clock. I would hope that that we could at least take one pass through this list where we could try and get, and maybe if just go row by row and see if anybody's got any questions or they don't understand or a clarification on it, so we can just make sure here we've got kind of a clear understanding of what they are, and then we can kind of get to here how we group and rank. Yes,
Mike?
Yeah, I have columns. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, Mike explained the columns too, as to what each column is about.
I have a question. The FAA has clearly requested that we make very specific recommendations. That we end up with this huge spreadsheet with lots of lines. But on the other hand, and certainly we should look at those, but I wonder if we can't give them a more effective and more general request. Is, can you guys are the expert, is there any way you can use the technology you have and the methodologies you have to simulate the dispersion that we used to have? In other words, if the only direction to you is, or the main direction to you is, can you use all the tools you have to, even though you use different technology to fly the planes now, can you simulate that dispersion? What would be your answer? Too vague, too general?
I don't think that's too big of a question. With our current technology, we can't do that, that I'm aware of.
So John, to get where you're at, on my page 3, because I printed mine different, but it's, you know, where we've got rows Q, R, S, T, U, V. These all, in my way of thinking, all are slightly different examples of how to try and do some of the dispersion stuff. And dispersion meaning, here we want to fan out the traffic kind of over the path it was, not moving it somewhere else. And I was thinking, you know, if this is what the committee thought was a high priority thing we want to do, in the report, we might end up saying here, number 1, hypothetically, is we want to go ahead and have dispersed traffic and define what I would say is business objectives, some of the success criteria we're trying to get at kind of that business level, and then have this sheet attached saying, and examples of how we thought you might be able to achieve it is, you know, these rows. Here, could you guys look at this? Here's the objective of what we're trying to do, what we're trying to achieve, the boundaries or requirements of it. Here's kind of some very specific examples. Could you guys come back and tell us what would be the most appropriate way to try and achieve this? And you guys might say here it's row X, or maybe it's we could do what you're saying, but here's through a technology or something you'd understand. That's where I was trying to see is that we would, and that's why I was asking the question before, could we define kind of the business objective, the success criteria, some parameters around it, you know, like dispersion means X amount of distance to the right or to the left, doesn't mean, you know, and then here's examples of the way we thought doing it, and let you guys come back. And to me, that's a little bit of the best of both worlds, of being able to define what we're trying to achieve, but also referencing it back to the information that came out of the chart. Does that make sense?
Right, but I mean, what I was trying to see if, and I think we should go through the process you described, but I was wondering if there was a technology that maybe is not quite there yet, but will soon be available that you know about, that GBAS, whatever was mentioned, that this kind of by computer automatic dispersion, safe way to do it automatically, is on the horizon.
Well, you're trying to tie in not just what we might have, but also what the airlines have on board their airplanes. Trying to put those two together to test it is very complicated.
Right, no, I realize that. So I'm just wondering if there's something in the horizon that might make this dispersion task a little bit easier to do.
And maybe, you know, it'll have to do with how we write in the report that says here, this is what we're trying to achieve, here are some examples. Please do not limit yourself that there's other ideas or future things that are coming, you know, we can try and put that out there. What I'm wanted to be concerned about it. Again, just using this dispersion as an example. If we say we want to disperse, I think we have to give some parameters to, when we say disperse, you know, is it, you know, 500 yards, 1,000 yards, 2,000 yards? Is the dispersion of what we're looking for, is that distance different in Sunnyvale than what it might be in Mountain View, what it might be different from San Jose? It's so that whatever the technology or way you can do the dispersion is, we also have to give them a set of parameters or rules or guidelines for what we would believe is the acceptable dispersion. Does that make sense? And tell me, you guys are going to receive this stuff. If I'm saying it wrong, tell me now I'm saying it wrong. You can tell me later.
I don't think you're saying it wrong.
Okay,
However you want to say it, you're fine.
And again, it's, because I'm actually, even though we haven't figured this out, I'm trying to, since I get to be an initial drafter, you guys will all, of how we're going to draft this stuff up, I'm trying to structurally think of how we're going to be able to put this together and provide this information to give parameters of what we're finding acceptable and including the ideas of what we've talked about.
I'd like to add one thing.
Sure.
It's all on the same page. Folks, thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. We learned a lot today. And it's helping us understand your problem. But in the end, what this points out is that we're just councilmen who got stuck in this job and said, oh, okay, let's give it a shot. And so I think the best you can expect, although we've got some really good ideas from our constituents here as well, is maybe directions. But I think at that point, it's very reasonable to ask that we sit down once you've had a chance to study those, and then have a dialogue with some questions coming up after that. What did you mean by this? How can, you know, get that dialogue going at the ground level, and some people here that can help us. And then maybe find a solution that way. I think it's going to take multiple passes. It's not going to be a, here, do this, and you're going to say yes, yes, maybe, absolutely not. We got that out of this committee last year. We'd like something much more effective in terms of a continuous dialogue, I think, to say, how can we tweak this so it will work?
So
That's what we haven't got back from anybody yet.
and you're right, so like, for example, this, and I know you guys are just still working through this, we only all got it just, Wednesday.
Sure.
So if it comes again the Friday before, or the Wednesday before the next meeting, that's when it's hard to have that dialogue. So if whatever you're working through here, and we're gonna work through some of this today, because I do agree you should go through the document, and these guys have to leave in about 30 minutes. So I'm gonna take back some information, we're gathering right now, right? And we're gonna gather, and then that gives us a chance, then we'll go back through whatever you guys have put into here, but it has to be within the next week, not the week after.
Right.
That way, we have a chance to start that dialogue, maybe call and ask questions, but we're trying to respect what you guys have as parameters as far as having attendance and conversations, so if it needs to be at these meetings, it's just part of us trying to understand what you want and when. Okay.
So you need more than 2 minutes to look at it.
Kind of, yeah,
So, we're going, yes,
Mary Ann.
yes.
I have a question based on what we experienced with the select committee. And at some point towards the end of our meeting in the autumn, we had a suggestion that perhaps we run 2 different routes, not dispersion, but 2 different routes that would come into San Francisco. And the FAA shut us down right away because they said that is too hard to coordinate with the air traffic controller. Because at any one time, given all the possibilities of the change in times, the spacing, all of that, that is something that cannot be handled. My question goes to, we were just dealing with 2 different routes at that point. Does dispersion come under that same sort of subject, that it becomes difficult for the ATC to handle this, or is it something they can do because they've done in the past?
Okay, I've seen a question mark right there, and I'm looking at the FAA. So they're thinking for a second. how they're gonna respond.
And we need to talk about, I mean, I want to look at what you guys have proposed in order to really formulate an answer. And I don't want you to have to sit and wait for the answer. If it's not going to be feasible, we'll come back and tell you. But let's see what you have first. Let's get a chance, because it is going to be very complicated.
And that's where my question is going to. I hate to put a hard stop on this, but at the same time, realistically, given our time parameters, I want to be sure that we are even going down the right path in bringing up this subject of dispersing flight. At this point, do you see that there could be a possibility that we could go forward with flight dispersion?
I really don't know.
They're shaking their head no, they don't think they can do it, no, they can't make a determination that they can or can't be done.
Correct.
Okay. So,
Thank you.
with
Yes.
that in mind, again, I hear that you're asking for specifics. Are you going to have to be asking them for waypoint specific, height specific, altitude, speed, right, left, up, down? What can we do to help at this point define dispersion?
I think the answer would be the where. So where do you want to put a waypoint, for example? Then all the other factors that have to come into design will come into consideration. Whether it's a 3-degree or a 3-5 or the type of aircraft or the turn, those things will come into play, including environmental. You tell us the where in the dispersion, and then that's what has to be looked at.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we are gonna get to this list. I just have to go ahead and say, we keep saying we're not all experts. We may not be experts at FAA, how to write procedures, but the people that are around this table are experts at how to listen to people, look at a problem, and define parameters to get to solutions, which I think that's what we're really trying to do. And I'll just tell you people that don't think you're experts, you guys do that all the time in your city, so give yourself more credit. So we're going to go to this sheet.
Just raise my self-esteem.
So,
Mr. Cannon, clarifying question, when we get started. Do you know if, as we go through this, I'm just curious, this 228 document, and I'm doing this for the purposes for these guys have to leave soon. This one came out, and we were attempting to answer a lot of what's in here, and it's kind of piecemeal. There's a lot of stuff in here. It was airport, it was us. Is the questions from this rolled into this? And the reason I ask is I'd like to be able to make sure that we address what we could off the 228 document and have that set aside so we're working from one document, not two separate documents. So if there's still questions remaining off the 228 this later, have them either rolled into this or addressed so that we are not trying to chase multiple places
so
where we're
what I will
answering
do
questions.
is, let's go ahead and say here, we're closing the 228. I will go through, to the best of my ability, see if there's anything that we need to go ahead and pull forward so you have one place to go ahead and.
Thank you, because we're trying to make sure that we have it in one bucket that we're
Right.
looking at.
Yes, yeah, we'll try and do that.
Yeah, I think I looked at this.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah,
I
mean,
just
it
want to
would-
make sure we made
but-
it.
didn't
but-
recognize
but
228.
let us go through and we'll take another pass to see, and if there's something from there, we'll pull it forward as opposed to keep making you point.
Thank you, because we don't want to have some.
I get your
idle use.
procedural question you're trying to get.
Okay, thank you. Excellent.
So, here, now if we're looking at the top of this list, thank you, and it's, maybe this, I don't know the easiest way to go through this, if we just, and maybe I'll just say here, we're at line item A, this is about modifying the way we fly. Does anybody have any questions about this? And really what I want to try and get is, each of the people on the committee, is there enough information here that explains to you so you understand what you think we're talking about here? If there's something you'd like to have added or whatever, and if we can try and, I want to try and see if we can quickly go through all the line items so we get the committee at least understanding of what they are. Does that sound reasonable? And do you have any suggestions, please?
Yeah, this whole first section is all about modifying the way planes fly, as opposed to the paths they take or anything else. So it's how they fly. And I will add that I sent this list to the consultants that we hired, And for a lot of them, in this first category of modify the way planes fly, they came back and said, you know what, they're already doing this. So we might be able to knock some off of this very quickly if we get confirmation that indeed this is what's already being done. So the first one, limiting to the absolute minimum speed necessary, basically keep the plane safe.
So to say what you said, could I make a request to the FAA that this first section, which is gray, which goes A through K, is rather than us necessarily going through this, is this something you guys could look at and go, yeah, here we're doing that, we're not doing that, so that, and come back, not right this minute, but in the next one?
Next meeting, A through K.
Yeah.
Got it.
And again, in the same way, where we're going to try and get you our consolidated information, anything we change in this early, if we can get that back so that we can consolidate your answers as appropriate in this as well.
Okay. Do you want to know specifically which ones they said might we still look at?
Sure.
So A, B.
What do you mean? What do you?
These are the three, there's three that our consultants said you might not be doing.
So these are the ones you do
So
not.
these are the
need.
ones that you should look at to say whether or not we're expecting you to say, oh yeah, we should look at doing this.
Feasible.
Yes.
So, okay, the ones that you're saying are feasible are the
Yes.
ones you're about to list.
Yes.
Okay.
A, B, and J. And all the others, they thought you were already doing this, but again, it would be good to get confirmation on that.
Okay.
Excess things that you think, that they think.
Are feasible.
So
Yeah.
my comment on many of the items in this section is they seemed a little generic for me.
Same here.
And this is, you're just looking at J, for example, it says, limit or defer flight procedures that are noisy. Yeah, we want that.
That's what my point is.
Yeah, and that to me, that seems, and if the answer is here, that's just a very generic thing, there's not enough detail for us to respond to, that seems to me to be an acceptable answer.
But in addition, don't overlook the notes that go along with the suggestion.
And they start with, the definition of a noisy procedure needs to be clarified.
Yes.
I mean, that's where it just kind of gets tough to say. I mean, that's acknowledging this line item is a little bit generic, the way it's currently written right now.
Yeah, but it further goes on and says, whatever we ought to do, we analyze the AEC2 tool to satisfy ourselves that, at least in the prediction, that the noise concentrations are going to be acceptable.
Could you say that again, please?
You have the FAA uses a noise modeling tool, AEC2, I think it is. And that is a D or something after that. Yeah, the point is, you've got a modeling tool, and anything that you come up with should in fact be run through the model, and we'd like to see the results of that at some point, and to help make a determination for our people, is this going to be effective enough pass?
But I think we already have a question outstanding that is about how the modeling of the noise is done.
Right.
That is going to be applicable to any recommended solution that comes out, because we want to understand whatever the recommendation or mitigation is being in, or we put in a mitigation in place that's going to make it worse, right?
You asked for that and you have not gotten the noise modeling data yet?
Yeah,
You have not gotten it?
I don't think so.
And that was true of the select committee as well.
For which?
The question was, and I think that might be one of the things that comes out of the 28 memo.
So you're not talking about the policy per se, you want hard data on the procedures?
Yeah,
Noise
how is
modeling
it
data
done?
the procedures.
For
Got it.
example,
Got it.
over these paths that we're talking about here, what are
Okay.
you guys using as baseline data? How are you measuring what's different if it changes? How do you validate that your model predictions, turn out to be correct with what goes on? All that kind of stuff. And that's going to be important for us to know as we take a look at whatever mitigations you might do forward. Because we could make a change where it technically is better, but we're still getting complaints. How would we know? Okay, so that was a quick way of going through A through K. Thank you. Do you want to talk, the next section is this yellow section, L
Sure.
through P. Do you have another hot safety tip like that?
Well, they also did provide some input on these, but these are modifying the paths, which in some ways is closely related to dispersed flights. But we kind of differentiate them there because here we're saying it's a specific path versus a dispersion of them. So,
I would just say while you're looking, I think these are very different than the dispersion.
yeah,
The dispersion discussion, as I have understood it and would like to try and define it, has to do with how, let's spread the traffic a little, some left, some right of what the existing.
We have another section of.
Right, I know, but that's what I'm trying to say. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page of what we mean by that. And that this moving stuff is here, we're really talking about it's going to go someplace different than what we've historically seen. Or maybe there's some amount of traffic there, there's a greater percentage might go there or something.
Right.
But that's the difference between dispersion and move.
Yes.
We're all kind of cool with that?
or I guess I wouldn't necessarily say move, but like new, when it comes to a flight path.
Okay.
It's a new one, or we should use it more, so we know that.
Okay.
So the section L through P, I would define as kind of new, sort of new flight paths that we should use, and or modify. And the first one, I think, is the one that's near and dear to a lot of folks' heart, which is the RNP path, or the RNAV. That one is the rail, but we'd like to see that one modified. So it's not a rail. The other ones, the O and P, those were the ones where I can't remember who from the FAA said this. It might have been Tony who said, tell us where you want the planes to go. So we'd have to come up with where we want them to go for those. But I don't know that I can knock down one of these at this point.
Okay. Does anybody of my colleagues right here, L through P, do you guys have any thoughts, questions, clarifying?
Question on this one. Is your consultant going to set up noise monitors for some of these things?
No.
Okay.
So my question on L would be, what do you mean by changing our path? Are you saying what, sorry, I can't see your name.
Oh,
Is that where you're asking for multiple RNAV paths? Are you asking for the RNAV path to be moved to a different area? And that's where I'm asking for.
Where?
Specifics. That doesn't mean anything.
And I think, it's, if we're looking at the presentation, the slide that was up before, it showed, we had, here, they want this to change. Essentially, we've been kind of talking, correct me if I'm wrong, we've been talking about dispersion of this. This specifically is talking about dispersion of this.
No, not dispersion, moving it up.
Well,
Moving
So that's the clarification.
okay.
Yeah.
So,
Write that
so,
down,
so you mean,
Move north.
Write
So-
that down and describe what you just said. Yeah.
That's the same thing I said earlier. If you take that turn and move it up, then you can start your approach hour.
Yeah, as written,
Maybe move it or have 2 or 3 paths like this.
I understand. So as written, it's ambiguous.
right, well, this is good, this is why we're trying to go get through this before you guys walk out the door, because it's the clarity that helps. Because what they don't, either move it or make it not be a rail.
So one quick question, Gary. Am I going to be modifying the spreadsheet? If so, I'll take
Here,
tons and tons of details.
Yes.
Matthew,
Does that represent what
Okay.
you want to move our
I think we're out of that business.
Good.
But
Congratulations.
I would suggest you take good notes, so
Yes,
that
so
when
you
we
check.
publish what we're doing, we've accurately, done what you said.
Yeah.
Because that's the kind of work, we'll probably work and expand it a little bit more, to reduce ambiguity. Anybody else got any other comments or questions about LM?
I had a question about N. It says planes already fly these routes, but the number is decreasing. Why is it decreasing from these?
Lisa or Garrett, do you guys want to respond to that? One of you guys probably typed that.
Hang on a second. What was the code?
N.
FAA suggestion, planes already fly these routes, but the number is decreasing.
I don't know that we know why. I don't.
Well, that's why, does the FAA know why? That's
Yeah.
what I'm.
So I think.
I know what you're talking about. Again, that's an Eastern Milpitas group that's airplanes coming from the east come in to fly San Francisco. We don't know the reason why that concentration is reducing, but over time, we've seen a reduction of that. I don't know the exact numbers, it's about 8% now. Yeah.
Jerry, can I clarify? You're saying that path over in the sky is flown by airplanes, but those planes are going to San Francisco?
That's correct.
They're not flying that path going to San
No,
Jose?
they're going to SJC also.
There's a few.
So to clarify, they are coming in on the Diamond, but they were landing at San Jose.
That's
No.
right. I don't know if it's
Here,
probably
here,
not Diamond.
I'm gonna ask Matthew to go ahead and capture that what we like is, we'd like FAA to give us a better understanding of what is the traffic patterns that are using that today, and what the directional trend of it is, and is there some reason we couldn't use it more in the future?
Right.
You're getting all that stuff, whether you're,
So are you saying that there is a procedure that exists on the east side now that they're flying? Okay. That is a proposed, right? That doesn't exist, or does it?
Well, this was an actual
I
flight.
can't hear this part of the conversation, and I'm curious about if planes are flying in on a diamond and it's Sunday.
Clarify your question on N, because we don't understand it, then we may go back and have to look at things like, we'll pull up radar tags. Like, remember we first did the first ATC 101 and we showed you guys that radar map and you could see planes flying around? We'll be able to match a day on data to find out what those planes were doing, why they're on that east side. Or they visual VFR, was it a go-around situation? We'll be able to find out the why.
right. So, and I think
That's all.
the generic question on this east side approach is, Matthew, he'll capture this, is what is it being used for today? And does it have any possibility of being used for?
And you're talking the aircraft that flew this one? Yeah, on page O.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So this is the.
Yeah, that was an actual flight.
Yeah.
Do we know the flight number and the day and time?
I did, right there.
Oh, that up in the corner.
Right. So Jen sent me
That's
a
so.
ton of flight paths from March 15th.
Okay.
And I was stunned at the number of different routes they took.
So as you guys go through this, that's really important to reference where you have your consultant giving you flight number data.
This is Jen right there.
Whoever it is, whoever's giving you flight, I thought you said Jen was proud.
Sorry.
Whoever's giving you flight number data,
Mhm.
those call signs will help us to evaluate.
Okay, I can
Call
send you a
sign-
better.
Call
version.
sign
This
and
didn't
date.
cost too much.
Time helps, but it's, call
So
center
those
should
are
be
probably
able to walk.
vectored flights.
Say again.
Well,
Those are vectored, they are not a route. They're-
Well, that's what I was gonna
Yeah.
look into and see.
But again, the interesting thing is, if a plane can fly that path in the sky on a vector flight, then why can't it be defined as a procedure? I mean, that's, right? And this is where, just for, on the FAA side, this is where we look at, well, if a plane flew there once, why can't you make it go there all the time? Or more of the time? That's our perspective of what goes on.
On
And-
the-
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I wanted to back up just to make sure we're clear. On L, when we say go north on that, I'm assuming it's like over the bay as opposed to over any city. I just want to make sure everyone's clear on that. Matthew's caught that in his notes there. That on L, it goes over the bay as opposed to any city.
This part?
On L, yep. And when we say move it.
Go
move away
north.
Go north over the bay.
Okay? Last chance for L through P, and the public, if you've got notes and you don't have enough time to say it in your 2 minutes here, you can always send comments about any of these items to the committee that I'll take a look at and see how we might be able to incorporate them. And we'll probably add them, whatever your comments incorporated or not into the minutes so people can see what you said. Last on L through P. I'm going to move on to Q through CC, which is dispersion of flights. And this is, again, where we're talking about how to spread over to get more of what people have historically seen. And again, to me, this is a business objective with lots of different specific techniques that people have suggested might be done to achieve that result. Okay. Does anybody have any specific questions about Q through CC?
Well, one question on some of these, you already kind of gave the conclusion by saying unlikely. Do you want to just...
Let me add to that. Those are notes.
Yeah.
Those were...
Maybe we should take some of the unlikelies out, because...
Hang on just a minute. I'll just say what's going on. I've been through this process once before. I know that we heard it earlier today. Every little deviation is a new procedure. You take the defensive and technical, and it's not necessarily very that productive. For that reason, I think it's confident and unlikely, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't pursue it if we think it's a good idea.
Which is why we ranked it, so our scale, it's not necessarily 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in rank order. It's 1, we thought this was high priority to look at, and then the same scale, 1 was we thought it might be fairly easy, 5 means we think it's more
We think it's
difficult.
hard. That's what we like, where the feasibility issue is.
Whereas I think, Glenn, I think you ranked it 1 through 6.
I was trying to get this through the list, but
Yeah,
I
we
think,
didn't do that.
again, this is, you know, where it's point in time, right?
Yeah.
Again, I think this section right here, the disperse flight paths, there's been a relatively consistent stream of thought that has come from people that might be a good idea to do and a high priority item to do. I would imagine, I'm just projecting, I don't know exactly, that in the report, it might say, here, we would like the FAA to look at dispersing air traffic back to historical type norms. We might define here, what is the amount of left and rightness that we would like to, that we think is acceptable of that. And then here, reference the spreadsheet, this section that says here, these are our ways that we thought that you might be able to achieve some of this stuff. Or do you guys have a better way of how we could achieve the business results of dispersing flights within these parameters? Again, that's just, I'm just thinking, projecting a little bit about how some of it might look in the report. Because again,
The objective here is to give you enough ideas to evaluate whether or not there's a way to get the dispersion you're looking for.
So tell me the numbers again. So like a 1 in one column maybe.
A 1 is high priority and 1 is likely.
1 is a high priority and 1 you believe it's likely.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Feasible.
2 is a
Feasible.
lower priority, but you believe it may not be likely, but you're at least, okay, okay.
Did you have the same system on your?
no,
I see that you have.
no. But my ranking was based on just reading through it the first time without having had any more discussions.
And in all fairness, you had a very short list versus now what we have, so
Right.
you ranked it
Right.
1
So-
through N.
And this is the kind of thing, if the committee members want, is I'm kind of envisioning some, maybe hopefully by like Tuesday, we're going to be able to republish this list with any changes. And if the committee members then want to come back and they want to add, you know, we could end up with a column of here's what everybody's thoughts were. And we could simply end up, you know, maybe we'll total them up and go, here, this is, everybody thought this was a 1, or, you know, we'll figure out a way to try and help with the ranking.
I certainly appreciated, since Gary is a pilot and knows a lot more about this, I thought that was incredibly helpful when it comes to feasibility. I just wanted to add that.
Right out of the
I know you do. I have all kinds of pictures to prove that.
And again, here, this is just an example. If you look at line CC, you know, it's about the dispersing flights, and it says here, discourage narrow, concentrated, single line flight path. That's not really a solution. That's a business success criteria that we might want to be applying to all of these. So that's where we'll have to modify this a little bit in terms of, again, I'm approaching this from what's my business objective, my success criteria, set of requirements, and then what a solution might look like, as opposed to just here, what's a solution.
Well, yeah, that's kind of why that's a 5, because we thought it's hard to act on that.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think that, to me, it might change into, that's a success criteria to the overall range of dispersing traffic, right? So that's where I think we can do some modification of this and not lose the concept and maybe get the concept to go to all the appropriate things. Any other thoughts from the committee on Q through CC?
Well, just before we move on, I just
Sure.
want to just throw out a suggestion. We can also, when we go through this, we'll reconvene to, prioritize the categories. And I know which one is going to be the number one priority, but specifically the other categories that we might want to also prioritize. So when we go through it, we can focus on our higher priority.
So I think where you're kind of trying to say is here, dispersing flights might be number one.
Well, it will be
right?
So
But
we know that.
But the path before, where it said modify flight path as a group, that one, because that had multiple things that are a little bit different, they might
be a lower
grouped, yeah.
lower priority.
Or they might get, one might get grouped higher than others.
Exactly.
Okay. And the real intent is, that's why I said, kind of looked at Matthew, I'd like to be able to get this out to everybody well in advance, so everybody has lots of time to be able to really study this, whatever we come up with, and provide feedback before we get to the next meeting, and give as much time as we can to people, including the public. Anything else on Q through CC? Okay, how about DD through II, and this is penalizing and for noise and rewarding quiet. I'm not even sure how this would be
I have a
done.
problem with this one here, penalizing noise, right? So what are we saying here? I'm a pilot, I come in late, past 6 o'clock, because of a problem with my engine. So are we saying we're gonna penalize the whole plane and let the people in the plane go someplace else? Is that what we're saying here? I have a problem with this one. I really do.
Let me jump in here. This whole section is,
Well, what will happen to the San Jose Airport?
this whole section here is to take a look at all the possible ideas that we might be able to employ to cut the noise down. That's why this is here. Is it reasonable? That's for us to decide, but it's listenable.
I also don't think the
Your point is
intention was.
on point. There's always something screwed up that causes that to happen.
Right.
On the other hand.
And let's say you're on that flight, right? And they say, no, you can't land here because we have a curfew, we're gonna bring you over to San Francisco or the States. What are you gonna say? Go on.
No, so San Jose already has penalties, financial penalties, if you land during curfew hours and you're noisy. But if you're a quiet plane, you don't get penalized, because that's my naive understanding.
Right, that was that lawsuit by.
Yes.
Yes.
So I think there's a misperception about the curfew. And I think a lot of people think that you can't land during those times, but you can. You just have to be a quiet plane. But I can't imagine we could say, if you have a problem with your engine and you have to land, great, land.
That's not specifically stated here. So that's why I have a problem with that.
Yeah.
You know?
We can absolutely clarify that.
That sounds very unreasonable.
So,
You don't have to be reasonable.
Okay. That's what I thought. We're politicians, right?
so I think one thing that we might ask the airport to do is kind of somewhere either point us to documentation or get us, the information around what the curfew rules and operation is, so that we can reference that. And then these all, we'll see where things kind of come out, in terms of where they get ranked.
If I may?
Yes.
Leanne, I'm looking at this one and thinking Larry Ellsberg right away and legal consequences for many of these. And when I get to GT, we have discovered that some of the industries, Delta, I believe it is, has already started retrofitting their planes. I don't quite understand how we, as a South Shore committee, can say that we will be having penalize people for not having retrofitted. So again, I'm sort of with the last speaker as to how are we actually going to do this without legal ramifications
Okay.
for most of these?
So again, this whole section right here, I don't want to jump to the end of the book and say what's going to happen. But they're probably going to stay on the list because we want to make sure the list is inclusive of all the information that was gathered as part of the process. You know, these things may not get ranked very high, or maybe they will in terms of what we're asked to do, or what we ask anybody else to do. But at the very least, we're not deleting anything of what goes on because it's we're trying to document what we heard from people.
I do not delete anything.
Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not hearing anything else on DD through II.
So one point of clarification, remember, is that you as a body deal with South Flow. Some of the things in this list are not South Flow related. So it would, you know, that, they're separate. So just to point out, some of the curfew stuff, that would impact north flow, regular flow information, which is outside the scope of this group.
But it would also impact South.
It could impact South Flow, yes.
Yeah.
And so some of the items too here are, again, we'll get into the details later, but some of them, you know, just aren't feasible. And you have marked them as feasible, just to let you know. Like the first one. The first one, you know, is not feasible.
If I could, perhaps the airport could provide some information to the committee on some of those matters. You're saying that first one, for example, Airport Noise and Capacity Act of 1990. From my understanding, and I'm not a legal expert, but it basically said that airports who had curfew programs could continue those curfew programs. New curfew programs could not be implemented. An existing curfew program could not be made more restrictive than it currently is. So to change that to a 10 p.m. start time instead of 11:30 might not be a number one on your feasibility, because that may take action from Congress.
And again, I think as it relates to all this, the curfew stuff, that's where I think we need to get the right documentation, clarification, exact specifications of what it is. So, okay?
We can provide.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to move on to JJ through LL.
And apologies, we did add a few things along the way, and it looks like we didn't quite catch up in our labeling. We've got 2 KKs on this page.
How did that?
Who did that?
And just, you know, Matthew, so if they've got 2 KKs,
Sub-note 1,
we should call it KK1, KK2, because I don't want to go and renumber everything after this, because then it just get confusing. So when we fix the numbering, we'll KK1, KK2, not, oh, let's relabel everything below, because then everybody's notes will be screwed up.
No, that's what happens when you do something you didn't.
But you didn't put in these letters, right? This was for
Okay, and to your point, Gary, you know, this is all very good work. I was going to tell you guys thank you, so don't hassle yourself for midnight.
Oh, I don't mind hassling myself, it's fine.
This is why we did it one more day.
But I will on what is KK2, trigger when greater than 5 knots. This is, I think, what one of the speakers is referring to. There's lots of information already defined and laid out in terms of why that probably isn't going to change. So like where you got this is a estimated feasibility of a 3.
We've heard some other comments that could be,
Comments from who?
Remember where we heard.
I guarantee, I
Yes,
you
so
heard
the
it from the ethics.
consultant we hired has been talking to the FAA.
Again, well.
Well, let's wait and see what happens.
Yeah. And since there's 45,000 people at the FAA, I feel like maybe they're talking to different people than we do.
Okay. Any other thoughts or comments on what is this stuff that has, you know, like remove the displaced runway designation? That is probably, I mean, you've got that a 5 on your 1 to 5, but on your 1 to 5 list, that's a 99.
Well, keep in mind, the priority is way down.
I understand, but just using GBAS, trigger the 5, think more. Monitoring of noise, yeah, I think that's not a mitigation in and of itself, but is probably going to be very important going forward. And I know different cities are looking at different options of what we might be able to do about monitoring.
Actually, that's been a common refrain from all of the meetings, the select committee, and trying to define a new roundtable organization for the South Bay. This one, all of that has been focused on how do we know what the noise is, because the only tool that's available is your modeling tool. That's it. And to be frank, there's a great deal of discussion vis-a-vis its accuracy. It's frankly, what I've been told, the tool model and real data have never been compared. And that's a whole. In any engineering or scientific process, if you may have a model, you at least like to make sure it's right. And to my knowledge, it hasn't been. So I'll say it that way. This is one reason why that's not.
And that's one of the open things about the noise procedure stuff that we still have with that today. Okay, because you guys clearly aren't looking at the clock. You guys have a hard 3:30 stop? Okay, I'm just,
3 minutes.
I'm glad you guys are here and I want to respect your time.
I'm gonna step out with him, just to say goodbye, and then I'll come back in.
Okay, so I think noise, the monitoring piece is going to be very high in the list, I'm just saying. MM through OO, this is changes to FAA operations to reduce noise, about stricter rules for ground noise. That to me is a procedural, how you create procedure change. Change with information is provided to pilot. I'm not sure what that, what does that mean?
Where's that? Which one?
NN.
So you explained this one to me.
Yeah, I gotta be. The
This was your example of Hawaii.
pardon?
This was your Hawaii example.
I've forgotten that. Hey guys.
It was late.
I think I'm about the oldest one here to deal with it. Okay. Let me see. Oh, I know what this is. This, if we want, if a pilot files a particular approach, and we wait until he's 20 miles away, it increases the cockpit load like crazy, it's not safe, let's not do that. Instead, if you know that you're going to have a situation where you would like to do that, get it out to the pilot shortly after takeoff. You know, at least you've got some time there during the cockpit to do the machinations necessary to reprogram the FMS system. But you don't want to do it in the last 30 minutes because that's a safety issue. And you want to fly in the airplane as opposed to pushing buttons. That's what it is.
Okay.
Did that what I said before? Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Good check.
And again, I think OO is procedural, how you guys, how the environmental division of the FAA is looking at the noise. It's not a mitigation in and of itself.
Yeah, and in the notes column on the last two lines there, it says you really need ground monitors to validate that.
So I'm moving on to PP to SS. PP is my thing I keep, no, it's not. This was,
So I do have a comment
go ahead.
on one of these on RR. I think I combined two that should be broken out. And have SFO oceanic arrivals and the SJC SFO would then only compete with the data. That should be one, and then from there on should be the second one. Yeah, so we've got RR1 and RR2.
Because RR, I interpreted as my question I was talking about earlier of what we could do. So we'll break RR into two separate pieces. Okay, Matthew?
Now it makes sense.
So I have one question on that before we go.
Yeah.
Is this recommendation or request, is this when San Francisco is operating normally, or is this when San Francisco is departing towards?
When they're departing, when they're in their
South.
equivalent south flow.
Okay, so
At least the second R.
the second, but the first one is regular?
I don't,
So that would be.
We'll
that'd be a
get clarification about that,
Sorry.
okay?
Then on SS, just a little cautionary note there. If we're going to try, oh, sorry. Thank
And yes, thank you guys very much for coming.
Yes.
We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
you. Thanks.
Hey, we're on
So on SS, I think we want to be careful about saying, we want to use some of San Francisco's airspace, because they might turn around and say, well, then we want to use some of San Jose's airspace. And I'm not sure we want to do that, so just, for this room, we might want to be careful about this one.
We're gonna. I don't have a problem, they're already using our unit.
We don't need any more.
Yeah, well, that's true, but I mean, that doesn't mean, because we're not gonna give them any more, doesn't mean I'm not gonna have some of theirs.
That's fine, but,
Yeah, no, I get your concern.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on PP through SS? And TT? If you guys have anything you want to share on TT? I think TT is really, this is the thing where if we can get information to them quicker, that they can come back and have that kind of stuff.
No, this is the round table we're trying to put together
Okay, so I've got that. So what, because I see some rewording and stuff here and some editing and stuff that's gonna go on. Maybe I would ask, it's really kind of these groups. And what I see as how we look at this, without saying here it's a final, but from a draft perspective, the dispersed flight stuff, does everybody kind of agree that's going to be probably at the top of the list?
Yes.
As a grouping and stuff? Is that, you guys kind of see that?
I'm not so sure I agree with you.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is, we have a lot of issues in front of us. And what might be a good idea out of one group should be implemented right now, and others. That's the reason for the ranking in terms of priority as well as the feasibility. And what I think we need to be doing is go through each of these groups and satisfy ourselves next, before we choose this next, what we think the priorities are. I picked them because I had some experience, but that's it. I don't think they're right, I don't know if they're not right, but we need a group to think on that. And then we need to take a look at what we've learned from the San Jose folks here, and our friends at the IAA. What is reasonable for them to do? It's going to take that assessment of both what we want as well as what they can do. And that's true for all of them. Then you can rank them 1 and 1, 2 and 2. You can literally do a data sort to tell them what we want to.
So, but I wasn't trying to say between, what is there, like 15 different things that are in the dispersed flights thing? I'm not saying here, each one of these things is what's top. I mean, again, I'm trying to, please tell me if I'm looking at this wrong. In the report we want to write, hypothetically draft comment, we might say here, dispersion of air traffic is, from the committee's perspective, is a high priority, 2/3 vote or whatever. We think that's a high priority thing for FAA to look at, how to do. Here's a list of, mechanisms you might, Mr. FAA, use to achieve that result. That might be one or more of these combined together or not. I don't know that we necessarily, on the dispersion flight stuff, that we would have to actually rank and say, we think it should be this specific way of doing it, or this way or this way. We're telling them here, the business objective we want to achieve is flight dispersion. Here are some ways to do it. Come back and tell us what you think is this is a good, your answer KK is a good one, or
But
this
I
is not.
think in order to answer your not making sense.
Okay.
Let's do it that way, and that would be comment on
Okay. But that's the only one I saw right now that, based on at least comments from a draft hypothetical, that's what it would be. It's, the other ones we're probably need to rank, and what I would,
We're not talking about excluding the other categories or other recommendations.
No.
The way you're talking about approaching it, which I agree with, is to say, have a high level dispersion. We prioritize as our number one priority. Here are the list of things that we are recommending or suggesting. If you have any other suggestions, FAA, then please provide us that feedback. Here are some other areas that we think are also priorities. And one would be modify the flight path. And then list the areas of modifying the flight path that we think are recommended. And then go down the list from there. But it's not an either or.
that. I don't think it should be, but I'm agreeing with you. But I just don't have in my head how this would look at.
I'm kind of curious, what did the select committee, what did the final report from the select committee, was it grouped by column E, or was it like
It wasn't,
each
it
individual?
wasn't like that at all. It was, they went through, they had almost 200 recommendations. And they had recommendations, and then what the proposal was, and then they had some other stuff. I don't remember the exact structure of it. It was very, very tightly.
Can you speak up for Mary?
I'm sorry, very tightly organized, much as the spreadsheet is, but it's just all words. Okay, they had groups, different groups like we do. It's similar.
Okay.
It just wasn't a spreadsheet.
And did you rank it by group, or did you rank it
We rank at each one.
within a group?
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
if I may,
voted on it.
the FAA ranks a lot of things right off the list, right off the top. I mean, they scraped the cream right off and said, okay, well, now we're getting down to the S tier. And these are the things that we will be dealing with. And then as a select committee, we grouped those and discussed them. As the FAA had said, there was possibility for feasibility, or maybe not quite feasibility, but we could work within that. And so it was more FAA-led, don't you believe, Gary?
I agree. There were 34 suggestions. Let me back up. The public for the select committee was invited to offer ideas. I'm simply going to preface this by saying that while we have some very capable people who've got good ideas, they don't know how the FAA works. And at that time, we've gotten a lot smarter since then. Okay, so we're better prepared this time. I have no idea how many proposals they had. They didn't tell us that. They told us they looked at 34. Of that, 19 were determined to be not possible. That left 15. Of the 15, there were a number of suggestions that might be one of, a solution might be applicable to one or more, but it was all, the solution to that particular one was, response number one, response number two, and some of them had 5, some of them had 2, some of them had just 1. And we went through each of the possible alternatives that they said were feasible and gave them a response in terms of up or down and cut down. That's what
But we actually got a little bit more, it wasn't totally up or down, it was more discussion and more why not, and we pushed the envelope this way or pushed the envelope that way. So that took up some more time than I think we had expected.
That's true. And that's the same thing that's happening here, but in the final report, it just listed, what we agreed to do or not, and that's what the report looks like.
So,
and in fact, you can go to the Palo Alto FAA website or FAA link to that select committee. You can download that report. That might be. It's a good idea to review.
I'll just tell you that, in my own arrogant way of looking at things, I think we're trying, the FAA, we want to share this with them. We want to get their feedback early on of what they think, and stuff like that. And we will take that information in. I in no way look and say, if we think item BB is like the most important thing to do, and the FAA is kind of poo-pooing on that idea. If we think that's the most important thing, we're going to put that where we think is on the list. Now, when the FAA gets that, what they're able to work on and whether or not they do, that's their choice of their decision. But we don't have to, they're providing input to us that we wanted to take, and they've had people here today as a good example. But I am in no way looking at the FAA where they can kibosh something off of our list right now. We can put it wherever we want on the list. They may come back with their reasons and explanation why they don't think it should be done, but that's part of the response we
Exactly what
get.
they'll do.
Yeah, which is fine.
Exactly what they'll do,
Which
which
is fine.
is good. Because then we'll have some feedback on whether or not it was a good idea.
Yes, Mary Lynn.
What you're going to have to be very careful with, because we found this to be extraordinarily important with the FAA, with the select committee, is that every word, every nuance is taken in by the FAA and considered. And they are very reticent to say yes or no right off the bat, unless you have everything extremely well detailed, so they understand exactly where you're coming from, because they don't want to have any kind of gray area whatsoever. And on the other side of that, there are times where they would not even come back and respond to something we say. So this is where I've been coming from today, especially when we had the people from outside the FAA coming down to say, okay, when we're talking about dispersion, how specific do you need us to be? Because this is something we are going to have hit us right in the face with them. It's not that they do not want to work with us, it's just their way of working, their protocol. And it's very tight, very rigid.
Yeah, so, but I think, Gary pointed out the process is a little bit better. There's more knowledge. We're trying to give the FAA draft material along the way, giving them an opportunity to ask more questions and stuff. And this is where I think we're working on the assumption that we have a semi-collaborative relationship here on how we can try and do this stuff. And that if there are, I think, I'm just trying to get to is the FAA, I think if they see here, we'd like a little more information, they're willing to ask that question of us to try and get to a little bit better answer. Again, maybe I'll try and at least get an outline or a draft. The problem is I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves of what the recommendation might look like, because then it looks like here I'm ignoring what might come next. So I'm trying to be a little bit cautious of what might be there versus trying to say here what it's going to be.
Take a look at that final report. I think you'll find it useful.
Okay. Okay, so here, what I was going to try and get to is, I'm cyclically connected with Matthew, and there's some edits and other changes that we will try and make. I'm hoping by like maybe end of day Tuesday-ish next week, where then we could go ahead and republish this out with maybe some other my thoughts around some outline of things. And so because of that, I wasn't going to really try and rank each one of these items here right now. But get that out so we can, and hopefully maybe we get this out, people can, along the way, we don't have to wait till the next meeting, we get more feedback from people of what goes on. So if that's what it is we've kind of made this pass through this, we're not going to rank things. I was going to go ahead and go back and see if we wanted to have, if there was public comments. And what I was going to do, rather than everybody rewriting the card, because it's pretty much the same people that were here earlier, I was thinking I might just go through, call all the cards again. And I'm not seeing anybody in the public out there saying no. And if you don't want to speak, you don't have to. But is that okay with you if I just go back through the cards I had before for comments? I would go with Robert first, but he deferred, so we're going to start with Tony. And I'm kind of taking, this is item, we're now on 4.5, so this is your...
You have to say, sorry, could you please repeat the question, because I was actually working.
Well,
we're in the today, and,
that's fine. You've kind of heard, we've gone through this discussion, we heard the FAA today, we kind of talked about what's in our list, we talked a little bit about what our next steps are going to be. Is there anything you'd like to share with us? And you don't have to if you don't want to.
no, I think I'm actually
Okay,
good. No,
Robert, you do get to go first.
Okay. I think the process you guys are down is good. I don't really have any suggestions for the content at this point, but a process question that I think you might want to embrace follows on the comment that Ms. Bernal just mentioned, which is this set of recommendations is going to be pretty finely negotiated. It requires a lot of nuance and technical expertise, and the question I would encourage you to consider is who should be pulling this thing together. It's not clear that any council member would have the expertise to do it. Maybe. Maybe it's working with consultants, I don't know. But I think this is going to be a tough document to pull together, and a good question would be to ask how the select committee did it themselves. Thank you.
Joel?
Very quickly, for the line shown in O, if that remains on the list and you clarify it, if you could identify the city boundaries, and if it misses Fremont, that would be ideal. And thanks for your service.
Okay, I'm going to call someone next, but I'm making a note. Okay, thanks. Jennifer. And next will be Zachary.
Just had a few comments, and that, again, has to do with the dispersion. We want to make sure that we're talking about a very wide dispersion, the dispersion that was pre-2012. So that's a number of miles wide, and that should be dispersed over Sunnyvale, Mountain View, Palo Alto, the same as it was, as close as we can get to it. The other thing that I did want to comment, and it's already been brought up a number of times, is modeling and testing before and after the changes, just to make sure we don't make things worse. For example, let's say we determine that speed might be an issue that we want to correct, and we find that slowing down the planes might end up making them louder because all of a sudden they have to fly dirty. Things like that need to be tested ahead of time and then tested after the changes. So this is a little bit complex, but it's something that we want to look at. And again, I know a lot of people have mentioned it here, and I just want to reiterate. So, thank you.
Zachary? And then Mary.
A couple of points on dispersion. One, dispersion is good only if the plane's flight behavior has been quieted down. So I think we want to look at that first and get it as clean as possible before you even consider it. Secondly, the dispersion width is dependent on the cross-section of the sound impact on the ground, and there's something definition of that. So if we just, a little jig-jag here isn't going to necessarily, for a good chunk of the people, have any effect. Lastly, we've had we've had the puck waypoint come up a number of times. The puck waypoint is defunct now, but since we keep bringing it back up, I haven't heard anybody mention where it is. From what I recollect when somebody else looked at it, it used to be near Ponderosa Elementary School, a couple blocks from there. And the whole surrounding area, you have an elementary school probably built in the 60s, and also housing, also single-family residential all around there. So something to be mindful of.
Mary and then Ms. Boyle.
Yeah, I do want to take a moment to just say thank you to all the council members that are working on this, because I know it's a lot of work, and I really appreciate the effort everyone's putting into it. So thank you, and the airport too. And maybe this is kind of a note for myself, but there are so many nuances in all of these, and I guess I just want to make sure that the time is put into really thinking them through. And it does take, unfortunately, it kind of takes everybody that's going to weigh in getting their head in it, because you can't really figure out what you're saying or proposing until you spend some time sort of processing it and looking at the maps. So I guess I just encourage people to do that. And I want to make sure that, we as the public can kind of weigh in also on sort of what our top priorities are. So I guess we can do that by sending emails and talking to you. If you have any other thoughts on that, let us know.
If you have thoughts that you haven't shared with us yet, yes, send it to us.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Moreland.
I didn't put in a second card.
I said I was gonna read the existing cards again.
I missed that part, Mr. Mayor.
I'm a lot, do you have anything you want to say?
Nope.
I don't like him. Karen Porter.
She's gone.
Okay. I think we're at the end of what we're going to be able to do today. Again, my objective here is early in the week, Matthew and I will get something back out to everybody. We'll post it somewhere for the public. That then the committee can go ahead and provide comments, hopefully along the way, we'd be able to include anything else, maybe the ranking stuff, and then we'll talk about that at our next meeting.
I'm going to send you, I also sent this spreadsheet to the consultant that we're working with, John's gone, and they provided a lot more comments, so I'll send those to you as well.
Yeah, it's, I just have to do this when I have my big monitor.
Yes. I did this fittingly enough on an airplane.
Awesome.
It's a challenge.
I would encourage everyone to look at what happened in Phoenix at Sky Harbor Airport with the Next Gen, because it went to court, went to the appeals court, the FAA lost, they requested a rehearing, and what I can see, what happened is that they came to some agreement to change the flight paths with the communities. I don't think they actually had the rehearing from what I can see online. But, so sometimes they will do something to change the flight path. They said it was absolutely not possible to go back the way it was in Phoenix, but they did change something after all.
You heard the same thing here, by the way, for the select committee, when they introduced Next Gen in March of 2015. In July of 2016, we held our first meeting with the FAA in Los Altos. NSU was there and the rest of the group. And Glenn, I've forgotten his last name. Huh?
Martin.
Martin,
Oh,
thank
sorry.
you. In his responses, we're not going back. And over the span of the next 5 or 6 months that it took to get through to that final report, at about the 4th month, his two groups, instead of doing this, knocking heads, started integrating and started thinking. That was the change, and it takes time. You have to work together. I don't know that we're going to have that opportunity here on a continuing basis, but perhaps with the continuing roundtable that we're trying to set up, that may come to pass in this one.
Yeah, I mean, one thing, that I think when we talk about what is ongoing, we're going to be able to create a report and stuff, and essentially, it's going to request feedback from the FAA. The FAA is not going to get it done by the time this group kind of, officially stops. And that is something that'll have to be looked at, is how, once the responses come back from the FAA, what is the mechanism that we'll use to do that? Does this group reconvene in an unofficial manner? Is it, by that point, does the Cities Association have something?
It's OBE by that time. It's overtaken by events at that point.
Well, right, that's what I mean, but we'll have to kind of look at, there will have to be something out there, whether it be official or unofficial, of how we deal with what the response is.
Where we are on that first effort is in November 17th of 2016, we issued the final report. It's been almost 2 years now. And you still haven't given us much in the way of change. It's incremental change. That's the way the FAA works. It's a part of their process. And they're not going to change that process because it's tried and true and it works. But it takes time. Most changes take anywhere from 18 months to 36 months to implement, just to set everybody's expectations. So we're going to be long gone by then. Most of us will be out of office, but perhaps, I know I'm going to be. But I would like to see some positive results. We're starting to see some evidence of it now, but it's still not even remotely implemented. So,
I'm going to reiterate what Gary just said. One of the enlightening moments that I've had when I was on the select committee was I hit a website that explained all the partnerships with the FAA, the industry, aviation, the union. to government. I mean, there are at least a dozen of them. And when you begin to realize that each one of them has a say in what happens with these changes that we're asking, you begin to realize the process is not going to go through fast or smoothly. The other thing is, of course, there's been a change in the administration, meaning the president and also the administration, the head of the FAA. And we do not, I believe, at this point have a permanent FAA director. I don't think, I haven't heard today that Trump's personal pilot got promoted. So it's one of those things that we do have to keep in mind. What we did here that Gary alluded to was that Glenn Martin said we are not going back. The other thing that the group that came down and spoke to the select committee said over and over after we had worked the process was they learned their lessons from listening to us, and they learned that it works much more effectively to be proactive. But that said, twice now I have heard that if this were an easy fix, we would have done it. And not all the suing in the world can change that, given all the other things I've said before. So I think that's something we also have to keep in mind. And I think that's my end of the day say.
Okay, okay, sure.
I just want to just acknowledge, just thank Gary again. I mean, you guys put in a lot of hard work, late hours. I think you were working over the weekend.
On a plane.
Yeah.
On a plane. So I just want to just acknowledge that effort.
Thank you.
So that's what I was going to end on. So we're going to end on Chappie's notes. So we're closing at, I don't know, it's like 4:06. Thank you, everyone.
One logistical thing for you guys, next meeting is on the 13th. You will get the agenda probably next week, because I will be actually not in the office the week beforehand for disclosure purposes. I didn't get it out to you 7 days in advance.
Great, thank you.